A huge portal opened before the heroes, and they stared with bated breath into the gaping abyss ahead. Master Sword, God Beidou called out to Mo Linger and Ye Xiaotian, ordering them to guard him at all costs. Looking up at the sky, the young man quietly said that for 1,000 years, no new sword god had been born in the sword world. People believed that he was capable of cutting down mountains, and they dreamed of seeing the rise of the sword god with their own eyes. Now, if the guy obtains the peerless sword, he will be reborn again as a true master of the blade. The enemy probably did not expect that the young man would not only survive the fall from the cliff, but would also achieve triumph. That year, when Qijan threw him off the cliff, the hero did not die, but crossed the border and entered the world of swords. In this fairy tale world, he became the new god of the sword, and now he decided to return to take revenge on the traitor. The young man raised his sword and with one movement cut the air. The force of the blow split the skies above the ancient land. Appearing before his disciples, Xiaochen Beiduo told them to pay attention, for a great battle was about to begin. The hero rose into the air, and the students froze on the top of the cliff, tensely watching what was happening in the sky. Their eyes were drawn to the concentrated energy producing rhythmic, powerful pulses above the ground. Molinger exchanged glances with Ye Xiaotian, nodded slowly, and said that the time had come and everything should begin. Xiaochen Beidou, meanwhile, mentioned Thunder Tribulation, a technique he could perform with a single swing of his sword. People looked on in shock, as no one could believe that his power was capable of opening the abyss itself. He continued speaking, asking the students to observe carefully how a true master should act. But he didn't have time to finish speaking, because the students suddenly rushed forward and hit him right in the chest. The blow was unexpected. Xiaochen Beidu was shocked to the depths of his soul and did not believe in the betrayal that was happening. Mo Linger told the mentor not to blame them, because his only fault was that he did not pass on the power of the sword to them. Ye Xiaotian added that now that the teacher died, the Beidu sword would become theirs, and they would become invincible. Xiaochen Beidu stood motionless in midair, not believing that his two disciples had taken advantage of his trust to strike. Mo Ling-er was prepared for his counterattack, because she knew that such a master would not give in and would definitely try to resist. And indeed, a moment later, streams of energy began to swirl around the teacher, gathering into a deadly wave of retribution. His appearance was completely enveloped from all sides by an incredible aura. His eyes became crazy. Ye Xiaotian couldn't believe what was happening. Lightning exploded in the air and the force of the blows was simply monstrous. Mo Ling-er was thrown back several meters and barely managed to roll away from the direct strike of the heavenly sword. She said that for this case they had a special remedy and took out an amulet that shone with all the colors of lightning. The girl said that this amulet increases the power of thunder 100-fold, and now the teacher can leave in peace. After these words, a bright flash from the sky struck Xiaochen Beidu, and the disciples covered their eyes from the blinding light. When the glow dissipated, only a scorched trace remained on the rock, and silence fell over the place where the thunder fell. Meanwhile, the people gathered below did not understand anything and peered intently into the changed sky. A ring slowly fell from the heavenly abyss, emitting an aura that distorted space and tore the air itself. The students realized that now the power of the sword belonged entirely to them and no one could stand in their way. Although at first it seemed that it would be difficult to kill the old master, but in fact, even the clothes remained clean. It was a victory without effort, and now they could indulge in glory and peace. From that moment on, Mo Linger and Ye Xiaotian became the rulers of the sword world, towering over everyone like gods. Meanwhile, Xiaochen Beidu was rushing around in timelessness, surrounded by the dense pulsating energy of all the elements. The ice-bone sword he gave to Mo Linger was a symbol of trust, but she used it against him. Ye Xiaotian was an orphan who was taken in and trained by a mentor, and it was he who plunged a blade into his chest. The teacher opened his eyes and froze. A different land stretched out before him, and the air was filled with a familiar silence. He had a hard time realizing that he had actually returned to Earth. But now everything was different and irreparable. Contrary to expectations, Xiaochen Beidu did not die and ended up in a completely different dimension. At this point, Qijan pushed him off the cliff, after which he entered the world of swords and became a god. And no one would have thought that after 7,000 years the guy would cut through the abyss and return back. The guy closed his eyes, and since then the aura of the earth became so weak that it was impossible to understand how much time had passed. It remained a mystery. Leaves were flying around the young man, which he cut with one glance. The sword god realm consists of sword disciples, master, sect, king, emperor, overlord, and god. But it was attacked by disciples, the kingdom fell, and now there is no way to get there. The internal meridians there were destroyed by a thunderbolt. And now, in order to return to the sword world, it is necessary to work on one's body and change the structure of the arteries, and the image of the earth is too weak and does not recover. So it is unknown whether the young man will be able to return to this world again. The disciples pierced him with a sword, and he will certainly take revenge for this. They will still see who they messed with. Meanwhile, the action took place in the east of Jianghai City in Gujianshan Park. Xiaochen Beidou thought that he didn't remember all these buildings that were now rising up here. It is unknown what happened to his parents because the hero does not understand how many years have passed on Earth. His attention was drawn to a guy who was skateboarding, exposing his face to the wind and enjoying the flight. Jianghai was much more lively than before, with many people around. Xiaochen Beidou was surprised to find that the Earth was now in the year 2020, and this was the transformation that had taken place. The girls were surprised to see that this guy had a cool hanfu and decided that he looked like they were from feuding families, so they needed to take a photo with him. Now the young man understood that although 7,000 years had passed in the world of the sword, on Earth only 7. Meanwhile, a lady approached him and said that he was probably going to a cosplay festival. She also began to examine his clothes from all sides and wanted to know where he had purchased this outfit. Xiaochen Beidou asked in surprise, "What cosplay festival?" Many questions flashed through his head and not a single answer, but the lady resolutely pulled him along because they needed to go quickly to the meeting place, otherwise they would be late. The young hero asked her not to run so fast because in the end he simply couldn't keep up with her. Meanwhile, a crowd had gathered around the three beauties, who were posing and being photographed with enthusiasm. Xiaochen Beidou, still in shock, continued to follow his companion. The guy turned around in surprise. Everything seemed like some kind of strange dream and was surprising. And the girl asked the crowd to let them through and intended to get to the most interesting part. At this moment, when the guys were making their way through the crowd, one couple noticed them. The lady was surprised to see that it looked like Xiao Chen and thought it was strange that he was here. After all, this guy disappeared 7 years ago and there was no news from him. The couple resolutely headed towards him and could not believe that they had found the guy, thinking that he might have disappeared because he did not want to return the money. The young man looked at them and recognized that they were Qi Guoqiang and Zhangwan Lu. But he noticed that he did not understand what they were talking about. They said that after the boy borrowed 1 million from Qi Zhan and did not repay the debt, his parents committed suicide, and the poor relatives were very afraid for their lives. Because over these 7 years, many respected families harbored a grudge against him. The hero was shocked. This news completely threw him off track. He could not believe that his parents had died. Xiaochen grabbed his opponent by the collar, and he looked at him in horror. Meanwhile, the young man said that he did not understand where Qi Zhan was now, but wanted to see him immediately. Qi Guoqiang recoiled from him indignantly, because it turned out that this guy also wanted to beat up a person. Xiaochen, meanwhile, thought that Qi Zhan, having pushed him off the cliff, was probably afraid of the consequences and decided to frame him. The parents were always strong people, but they couldn't handle such a blow. And it was hard to believe that everything happened exactly like that. Maybe this scoundrel just killed them and set up all the evidence. Meanwhile, Zhangwan Lu angrily noted that the young man looked as if Qi Guoqiang owed him money. Because did all debtors look so important? At this moment, Qi Guoqiang turned his attention to his companion and said that this girl was probably also living off Qi Zhan's money. However, the lady replied that she was hearing about this for the first time and could not understand at all what was being discussed. Xiaochen said that he didn't even know this girl and said that he wanted to immediately find out where Qi Zhan was so that he could sort things out. However, Qi Guoqiang replied that this would not happen and said that the guy just wanted to escape in this way, but no one would allow him to do so, and he would call right away. Zhangwan Lu also noted that his late parents would have been very outraged by such an act. The guy thought that soon everything would fall into place. He would restore his good name and take revenge on this scoundrel. Meanwhile, his friend said that this was too much and that she shouldn't offend her little brother like that. The lady said that this million meant nothing at all, and she would help to return the money. The couple were completely shocked. It turns out that this guy is a great guy. He got himself a rich girl and also appropriated money that does not belong to him. At this point, the conversation had to end, and Qi Guoqiang began calling Qi Zhan to tell him all the details of what had happened. Xiaochen gritted his teeth and thought angrily that they would soon pay for everything they had said. Meanwhile, Qi Zhan heard the phone ring and thought with irritation that he should pick it up. The guy asked who it was and began to listen angrily to his friend on the other end of the line. Qiang said that he met Chen at the festival and his friend should come to them immediately. Chen was completely shocked. Could this trash still be alive, and promised that he would arrive very quickly? After that, he stood up resolutely, ready to arrive at the scene as soon as possible and take revenge on this guy. He had a personal score to settle with Chen, and the guy was indignantly anticipating this meeting. Meanwhile, Chen's friend noticed that these people were behaving simply outrageously and promised to help her brother pay off his debt. Chen meanwhile looked around closely because he sensed another participant approaching. Chen pushed his way through the crowd and declared that Murong Xiaoyu would not help him pay off the debt. He said that he would not conflict with Chen out of respect for the Murong family, but advised him to leave on good terms. There was a tense silence after that, as a result of which the heroes stared at each other. Chen thought that his opponent's aura was strange. It seemed like he was able to control evil forces. Meanwhile, the couple looked at Qian with enthusiasm and happily greeted him. Tiang said that he probably knew this girl, and Qian confirmed his guess. This is a lady from the Murong family. Her name is Xiaoyu, and the girl's sister, Fei, is quite famous in eastern China. Chen listened to them in surprise. Murong Fei was in high school with him and Ye Xiaohuan, and this girl who is next to him turns out to be Murong Fei's sister. An amazing coincidence. After thinking for a moment, the boy said impartially that Qian could choose which death he preferred. With these words, the heroes looked at each other intently, and Chen warned him not to say later that he was not given a chance. The gentleman replied that this was not bad, and added that Chen could use his tongue, but it was unlikely to help him. Meanwhile, his opponent noted that Mr. Qi was too nervous and perhaps he should be taught a lesson. Qian stared into his eyes, not believing that this young man was actually planning to take revenge. After that, Qian said that he did not believe Chen's threats, because he had too much money, which could make even a ghost work. The gentleman then showed the bills and addressed several guys, promising them a reward if they broke Chen's arms and legs. Several strong guys expressed their readiness to carry out the task and looked sternly at their opponent. Chen looked at these brave men with an appraising gaze, believing that they didn't even realize who they were dealing with. One of them said that Chen clearly shouldn't have crossed the path of the respected Mr. Qi. Murong Xiaoyu noticed that these two were ancient martial arts fans, specially invited by the Qi family, and they were spoken of as top masters. However, her friend did not look scared and said with a smile that everything was fine. At one point, the opponent decisively pushed off the ground to perform a combat technique. He was confident that he could easily deal with this guy and quickly approached him. The fighter believed that he could easily get rid of this trash and then earn easy money. Chen dodged the attack calmly and noticed that it was too slow. After that, the young hero raised his hand up and everything happened instantly. The hero made just one touch, and it was enough to make his opponent scream in pain. He felt himself being thrown back by an unknown force. Was the blow really that powerful? Chen looked at the others calmly, wondering if this was really it, and no one else would show their skills. One of the boys approached the young hero and said that his name was Qing Long. He had mastered the fist style, but he wanted to know the name of Master Chen. The people around clearly realized that this guy had excellent abilities and an inner aura at the level of a master. Meanwhile, Murong Xiaoyu turned to her little brother in surprise, asking if he was also a martial arts master. The guy replied that he was not a master, but was a little familiar with the methods of cultivating immortality. And after this, the young man said that the boy should get out of the way and not get under his feet. He said that he only wanted Qian and didn't care about the others at all. Now it was clear that this guy had learned the power of immortals. Meanwhile, people said that this was not the only thing, because his breathing was incredibly deep, and he could be a great master, a level that is extremely rare. Qian remarked with disdain that even if this guy turned out to be a master, no one would be afraid of him. The gentleman stated that all purchases today would be at his expense, and Mr. Qi's accounts would cover the expenses in full. People began to thank him for such generosity, considering it a truly magnanimous act. The young man, meanwhile, noted that he really didn't like this guy and needed to get rid of him immediately. Those present decided that this was indeed the right idea and declared that they would carry out the order very quickly. Several police officers came forward and promised to deal with this boy immediately. Murong Xiaoyu stepped forward and demanded that this outrage be stopped, and Chen looked at the surrounding people with disdain and cursed in his mind. He thought about how he had just taken out Qian with one blow, but was seriously injured in the back by Mo Ling and Ye Xiaotian. Meanwhile, the crowd noticed that the young man had to leave immediately and demanded that he get away. Gien thought with excitement that they would still see how he would deal with this opponent. He asked Chen if he had finally stopped babbling. The guy was silent for a few moments and stared into his eyes. And after that, he said that the fight had not yet begun, and now was not the best time. However, the moment will come when the hero will return for him, and then they will see who will emerge victorious. After this, the guy turned around and walked away. And one of the martial arts masters noticed that this young man emanated such danger that his body was shaking. Meanwhile, Zhang Wanlu was crying bitterly, tears rolling down her cheeks. Gien looked at her but said nothing. Meanwhile, the lady said that Mr. Qi must definitely avenge Qi Guoqian. Qi instructed Qing Long to follow this guy and get rid of him at the first opportunity. However, Qing Long believed that it was extremely dangerous to deal with this young man, since this master was not afraid of anything except perhaps heat weapons. Gien said decisively that no master could compare to him, because he had a lot of money, with which the guy could eliminate anyone. Meanwhile, Chen went to the shopping mall and tried on a new suit that was more in keeping with the spirit of the times. Suddenly, the hero felt that someone had called out to him. Murong Xiaoyu came up to him and offered to go to her house. However, the young man refused this invitation and thanked her again for lending him money for clothes. The girl replied that she really wanted to introduce him to her grandfather, who had practiced martial arts for many years. Besides, she said that Chen had clearly offended the Qiguo family, and they were a powerful clan and might seek revenge. The young man replied that there was no need to worry, because they were probably all on edge right now, and if fate wanted, they would meet again. The young lady wanted to add something, but Chen had already waved his hand at her in farewell. After that, the guy walked forward through the large shopping mall that had many branches, and Murong Xiaoyu looked at him sadly. Meanwhile, it was already night outside. The young man walked forward through the park, his path illuminated by the bright moon. The hero raised his hand and brought it closer to the tree that was located here in this place. The guy understood that the Earth's aura was now very depleted. It was literally saturated with fragility. But first he needed to find a place to recover, which was absolutely necessary at the moment. The hero closed his eyes, and pictures began to emerge in his imagination that were supposed to help him concentrate. He needed a powerful body purification technique to enhance his Beidou sword skills. The final description of cleansing the body from chaos, the writings on the methods of cleansing the body with Vajra. All these techniques were very good, but the time of the earth was coming to an end, and cultivation was proceeding too slowly. A moment later, he looked straight ahead. There it was, the Sutra of the Crimson Mist of the Tempered Body. Although tempering the body with purple haze was considered one of the simplest purification techniques, in addition to tempering, it also absorbed spiritual energy from the external environment quite well. However, where to find the required aura remained a mystery. Chen did not know how to find it. However, it didn't matter now. He needed to restore his inner balance. The guy was sitting on a stone, and energy was condensing around him. Morning came, he was very lucky. At sunrise, there was a bright trace of the moon's power. The hero not only healed part of the wounds, but also easily overcame the middle stage of the swordsman's apprentice. Suddenly, the guy turned around sharply because he felt a person approaching nearby. A girl was running straight towards him, waving a weapon, and her entire body was covered in bruises. It turned out that she was being chased. The lady's name was Long Jiawen, and she was Xiao Kunlun's fiancé. Despite her pursuers, the lady continued to rush forward, ignoring attempts to stop her. And although the unfortunate woman could barely catch her breath, she looked quite determined. Chen was surprised, even though she was very young. Her sword skills were astonishing, because the lady had unknowingly crossed the threshold of the sword realm. Meanwhile, the girl noted that using a firearm in broad daylight to catch someone means completely ignoring the law. The bandits replied that they did not have arrows in their hands, but fear, and the law did not frighten them. And they advised her to be a good girl. If this lady pleased their young master, they were obliged to bring her. But the girl resolutely said that even if she had to die, she would not give up just like that. Suddenly, the sword fell out of her hands, and an unknown force threw the weapon in the opposite direction. One of the bandits turned around and angrily asked who had stopped them. Chen, who performed this trick, said that he was taking the girl with him, and the guys could go free. All this was so unexpected that the bandits stared at him in surprise, and Long Jiwen looked at the guy in confusion. One of the criminals noted that this guy was probably tired of living, but they would fix that now. However, all attempts to shoot Chen were unsuccessful. He easily intercepted the bullets right out of the air. The hero threw the shells on the ground and said that they were still young, and there was no point in talking about combat skill if they fired haphazardly. He added that Xiao Chen never repeat twice, and this girl will now go with him. However, the bandits replied that even if it was a master in front of them, he was against the Wu family and should understand the consequences. Meanwhile, Long Jiawen thanked the guy for his timely help, for saving her life. But then she added that even if he was a master, it was impossible to resist Jiang Zhou of the Wu family himself. The military and political circles were completely under their control. And with her new acquaintance's ability to escape, it's not such a problem. And if he has a chance to meet a man named Xiao Kunlun, the guy can convey that she was not mistaken about him. Xiao Chen looked at the girl in surprise. Did she really say that name? Meanwhile, the bandit turned to Long Jiawen and remarked that their opponent probably did not want to be punished. And then he muttered that he shouldn't swing a broken sword at them. And besides, it was unclear why this guy was acting so calmly, because upon hearing the name of the Wu family, he should have been trembling with fear. But their young opponent remained calm. Xiao Chen, after a moment's hesitation, asked what Long Jiawen's relationship was to Xiao Kunlong. For many years, the boy had not seen his relative, who had achieved considerable success in the war in the East. His new acquaintance replied that Xiao Kunlun was her fiancé. They had been engaged for 3 years and were supposed to get married this year. But he had angered the Wu family and was locked behind the eastern wall, and now she was afraid for him. The enemy, meanwhile, fell to the ground and grabbed his wounded arm, ordering his partners to grab the girl. Xiao Chen thought darkly that he had grown up on the legends of his cousin Xiao Kunlong and his exploits in the East. So this lady was his daughter-in-law and needed help. Meanwhile, the pursuers resolutely rushed towards the girl, intending to seize her. Xiao Chen blocked their way and said that he would repeat it again. She was going with him. The bandit stood there in stupor, surprised by his audacity. Long Jiawen thought that she had been studying sword techniques for 25 years, but now it seemed useless even against a couple of guns, and it was unclear what the point of such training was. After this, the lady leaned towards the sword, her determination final and rare in its strength. The opponents noticed that this was the land of the Wu family, one of the ruling families, and even if the master was in front of them, he would not escape the consequences. Ultimately, not only is it difficult to practice martial arts at such a young age, but it is also impossible to avoid punishment by provoking enemies. Xiao Chen addressed Long Jiawen in response, noting that learning sword techniques was not useless, especially considering that she had just started. The young lady stood in front as a sharp sword flew towards her. Xiao Chen noted that sword techniques not only included killing techniques, but also methods to strengthen the body, possessing incredible killing power, but it took 20 years to master them. It was for this reason that her dragon family ancestors had simplified these techniques into simple exercises to improve the body's health. And it was clear that such simplified methods were useless against firearms. The girl was very surprised because she did not understand where this master knew these details from. One of the bandits, meanwhile, asked what this man's name was because he controls a sword that hovers in the sky. And this is amazing. The hero said that his name was Xiao Chen, and for insulting his brother Xiao Kunlun's fiancée, he could spare them if only they would tear off their own right arms. But the scoundrels did not agree. They arrogantly said that people were giving their lives for the Wu family, and they should not be insulted, suggesting that they just part ways on good terms. They would no longer try to seize Long Jiawen. However, in response, the guy said that for him, they were nothing more than ants, and said that he counted to 3. At that very moment, the opponents opened fire, but not a single bullet reached its target. They could not understand who was in front of them, a living person or something else, since his behavior seemed too unusual. But instead of answering, the hero lifted himself off the ground and swung his sword. He dealt a crushing blow to the enemy, and it looked spectacular and completely unexpected. Long Jiawen couldn't believe that she was seeing this with her own eyes, because this young man's strength was astonishing. The hero meanwhile asked if everything was okay with her, and looked into the lady's eyes with concern. When the young man checked her pulse, he noticed that her heartbeat was unstable, and she needed to take a rest. The guy introduced himself by saying that his name was Xiao Chen, and that he was Xiao Kunlun's cousin. The young lady remarked that in that case she was his daughter-in-law, and he could call her that. But the next moment, Xiao Chen felt that he was being watched, and remarked with disdain that he shouldn't do this. The next second, he picked up a leaf that was growing on the tree. The hero threw the leaf forward with all his might, and it rushed along a trajectory, cutting through the air. After that, the guy told Long Jiawen that he would go and collect some herbs to help her heal. At that moment, the enemy watching them was amazed that an ordinary leaf had caused him a wound. It seemed impossible. and the two boys headed towards the overgrown bushes that were nearby. The hero noted that the aura of the modern city was too weak, and even searching for the herb that stopped the blood took him half a day, while in the immortal world of the sword, it grew literally at every step. The young man closed his eyes and concentrated all his energy in his palms. Because of this, incredible power was concentrated around him, and the flowers and plants around him began to change shape. Even without an alchemy furnace, the hero managed to create 2 low-level pills. Never before could the young man have imagined that he would use drugs of such low quality. He then handed the pills to his companion and told her to take them. But suddenly the girl stepped back and asked in fear what this thing was. Xiang explained that this was a healing pill created without the help of an alchemy furnace, and although its effect might be weaker than usual, it might be enough to restore. The lady said that, as her grandfather had claimed, the art of alchemy had been lost hundreds of years ago, and she couldn't believe that Xiang possessed this ancient secret. Then Long Jiawen suddenly knelt down, which surprised her companion, who didn't understand what she was going to do. With tears in her eyes, the lady turned to him with a plea to help save Xiao Kunlun. The girl said that he had angered the Wu family, and now his life was hanging by a thread. Xiao was surprised, since his cousin was at one of the highest levels of the hierarchy. How could anyone from the Wu family even dare to go against him? Long Jiawen responded by saying that the current world had changed, and Jiangzhou was no longer the same as before. The young man asked her to get up from her knees and added that she should not call him master after all. The lady was his daughter-in-law. It was amazing. Xiao had no idea how cruel the modern reality was. No softer than the immortal sword world. The hero said that he makes a promise. He will do everything to save his cousin, no matter what it costs him. The young man then turned around and said that he had some business to attend to, and as soon as he had finished with it, they would immediately begin to carry out the plan. Meanwhile, events unfolded in the Guangzhou Karaoke Club, where Qijun was indulging in relaxation in the company of several girls. Suddenly, one of the bodyguards burst into the room and anxiously reported to the young gentleman that the situation was critical. He sullenly asked what had happened. He was informed that the Bishop of Qing Long had disappeared and no one had any idea where he might be. The guy flew into a rage, threw the glass at the wall, and it shattered into pieces with a crash, and his fists clenched in anger. At that moment, a man entered the hall, whose appearance no one expected, and the bodyguards flew to the sides like dolls. Qijun, confused, asked with irritation if it was that guy again, and if so, did he really want to be executed? Xiao calmly told him to get out of his way, otherwise the consequences would be extremely painful. But the opponent only gave the order to his guards. Someone must immediately kill the uninvited guest. In response to Qijun's order, one of the guards hurriedly rushed towards Xiao, hoping to show loyalty and protect his master. However, his attempt ended sadly. The hero abruptly pushed the attacker away, and he flew off to the side with a crash, after which he fell heavily to the floor, unable to get up. Gien was completely at a loss, and the girls nearby began to run away to the corners of the hall in panic. Xiao walked closer, looking at his opponent with fury, and coldly remarked that this guy had already lived long enough. After that, he grabbed him by the neck and added that it was time to pay for everything he had done. In horror, Qijun croaked, begging for mercy and declaring that he was willing to pay any price for his life. But Xiao smiled with a cold mockery and said that he would let him go, but not in the way he expected. Then he threw the enemy away sharply, and he hit his back against the wall with a dull sound, sliding down. The young man said that simple death was too merciful a punishment, and therefore he would begin by breaking everything for him. Qijun croaked in a panic, trying to threaten, and promised that he would not let the offender leave alive. However, Xiao coldly stated that he didn't care how many connections the opponents had. He would always protect Long Jiawen and would not allow her to be slandered or offended. The girl responded with concern by reminding him that the Qi and Wu families controlled the economy of all of Jiangzhou, and that Qijun, although not the main heir, had access to dangerous resources and influence. But Xiao just chuckled and said that there was no need to worry so much because it was unclear how a few hundred people could help them. At that moment, he heard a voice from the crowd and saw another person approaching them. In front of him stood the leader of the Qing Long gang, a burly man with a stern expression, with a group of armed henchmen looming behind him. The enemy immediately arrogantly warned Xiao not to wag his tail in front of their leader, and disdainfully declared that someone had brought the Qi family's dog into this house, after which the scoundrel ordered his men to tear the stranger to pieces right there on the spot. The crowd began to roar and numerous thugs began to advance, waving clubs and clenching fists. But Xiao Chen scornfully said that he didn't intend to waste a second on this crowd. And at that very moment, one of the closest bodyguards had already broken through the ceiling with his head. It was Xiao Chen who forcefully threw the unfortunate man up into the air, and he limply followed the given trajectory. The hero calmly declared that anyone who did not want to die should leave this place immediately. Qing Long saw how the crowd, shocked by what was happening, actually began to retreat. For the first time, the villain felt confusion. He began to understand that he was up against a true master, capable of sweeping away anyone with one movement. He admitted his mistake, fell to his knees and apologized for his insolence, not knowing with whom he was dealing. Xiao Chen didn't comment on the apology, but simply turned around and headed towards the exit with Long Zhouwen. After they left, Qing Long ordered his men to quickly go get stronger fighters and report everything to the Qi family. His subordinates agreed without hesitation and began to act. Xiao Chen and Long Zhouwen went outside. The girl felt like Xiao Kunlun had disappeared and was in danger. Xiao Chen immediately asked who exactly in the Wu family had brought his cousin to such a state. The girl replied that it was the Wu family's second son, Wen Yilian, and her eyes suddenly filled with tears. But suddenly a familiar voice was heard around the corner, which made the lady suddenly startle in horror. It turned out that it was Wu Wenyalian himself. He said that he sent people after her because she was his. Long Zhouwen whispered in fear that this was the very person they had just been talking about with concern. Xiao Chen stepped forward decisively and demanded to know what he had done to Xiao Kunlong. The enemy replied that he had hired a lot of people to get rid of him. And now there would be a fight, 3 against 1. That was fair. Xiao Chen sneered with disdain, saying that he was overstepping his bounds and would soon regret it. And the next moment, without thinking, the guy punched his impudent opponent in the face. He flew back several meters and collapsed, knocking dust off the pavement. The whole crowd gasped in horror. People began to worry about the young master, not knowing what would happen next after such a blow. Meanwhile, Xiao Chen looked at the assembled people with disdain, his angry gaze promising trouble for everyone. The young man pushed off from the ground sharply, throwing up clouds of dust and cut noisily through the air. He punched the closest enemy with all his might, not giving him a chance to react. The same fate befell another of the fighters. He received a powerful and accurate blow directly to the side. After that, Xiao Chen roundhouse kicked the third type, and he flew away as far as a feather. Wen Yalian croaked with difficulty that he didn't understand at all who he was dealing with now. But in response, Xiao Chen silently stepped on his head, and the unfortunate man only groaned pitifully. Long Zhouwen quickly intervened, stating that if he was destroyed, Xiao Kunlun would never return. Meanwhile, Wu Wenyalian chattered that he had a lot of money, he was the second heir of the Wu clan, and added that Xiao Chen could take as much as he wanted from his brother. But Xiao Chen already understood that it was Qizhang, and that scoundrel had long ago gotten what he deserved. The hero resolutely pointed his palm forward towards the dumbfounded Wu Wenyalian and released magical streams. His body shook in panic. The guy began to wail incoherently, not understanding what was happening. Xiao Chen coldly said that he had broken all of his moving joints, and now he and Qizhan were brothers in misfortune. Wu Wenyalian groaned, promising that he would not leave it like this, and demanded to know the name of his tormentor. Without turning around, Xiao Chen threw out his name and left the city limits with his head held high. At this moment, Qing Long pointed his finger at him and called out to the elder, reminding him that this was the one who beat Master Qi. The elder said with displeasure that the guy was strong, but too cruel and selfish to dare to injure a person. He added that if the young man kneeled down and acknowledged him as his teacher, he might survive. Xiao Chen replied with icy politeness that he of course understood everything. But the person standing in front of him was unworthy. The guy said that after 75 years of training, this teacher had just reached the pinnacle of the Qi Purification realm. The crowd roared indignantly. The youth did not dare to be so impudent towards the respected elder Murong, who had cultivated martial arts long before he was born. The old man remarked in surprise that it was strange how this young man even knew that he had reached the Qi Purification realm and had been practicing for 75 years. Xiao Chen explained that before him was a man who was striving to achieve a middle-aged appearance. But he still lacked pills. In exchange for the elixir of life, the hero could tell much more. But he considered this a meaningless conversation. After this, the young man took his companion by the hand and firmly said that they were leaving. There was nothing more to lose. However, the crowd of people surrounding them decided not to let the boys go so easily and quickly prepared their cartridges. Xiao Chen instantly repelled all the attacks. His movements were fast and precise. Not a single shot hit the target. The young man calmly remarked that he did not want to kill. All these people were nothing more than ants, and it was better for them to move out of the way while he was in a good mood. People were shocked. This guy was catching bullets with his bare hands like something inhuman, and they began to retreat hastily. Only Muronghai, the elder of the Green Dragon gang, remained. He admitted that he did not recognize the guy at first and asked him for leniency. The old man thought that the young man's cultivation level was incredible. He hid his strength almost perfectly and looked like an ordinary martial artist. His body was unremarkable. Murong was amazed at how this young man not only determined his level, but also caught the fired bullets with his bare hands. Xiaochen noticed that the city's aura was too weak, and 70 years of local cultivation was a waste of time, and said that he was chasing two goals, maintaining youth and achieving strength, but losing everything in the end. The hero internally acknowledged that despite his mistakes, he was truly a rare and very capable cultivator. The old man blushed. The young man was too generous because he had strength without the help of treasures and potions. He warned that after what happened, the Qi and Wu families would not let it go so easily, but he would shelter them with him. Long Zhao encountered that he was putting himself at risk, as the revenge of the two clans could be brutal. Muronghai calmly pointed out that there was no need to worry, since even powerful families were inferior to the Green Dragons. Xiaochen had heard of the Green Dragon gang in the Sword World before. It was probably founded by the ancestors before their ascension. The old man declared that he owned many rare treasures and was ready to share them in exchange for guidance from the young man. And he, without hesitation, agreed to the offer. After this, Muronghai added that Qing Long should kneel down and thank the master for his kindness. Qing Long approached Xiaochen without hesitation, although his legs continued to tremble from fear and internal tension. Then he burst into bitter tears and began to beg the great master for mercy, asking him to show generosity towards him. Muronghai promised to punish his unworthy servant, but Xiaochen pointed out that such a pathetic ant was not worth even getting angry at. The hero said that he should convey to the Qi and Wu families everything that happened, because he himself would come to them later to talk. Soon, the heroes reached the Qing Long dojo, which was owned by old man Muronghai, and entered the spacious, well-kept chambers. The old man greeted the guests cordially and invited them to make themselves at home in his home without hesitation. Xiaochen was surprised that there could be such a spacious dojo in the very center of the city and asked about its connection with Murong Xiaoyu. Muronghai chuckled, confirming the relationship, saying that the girl had a bad character, but she was indeed his granddaughter. Xiaochen admitted that he owed the girl money and also asked the old man to help his beautiful companion change her clothes. Muronghai rubbed his hands in satisfaction. His granddaughter had pleased the great master and promised to take care of Long Jiawen because their families had always been close friends. The young lady thought warmly of Xiaochen, mentally thanking him for not forgetting about her. Meanwhile, Muronghai and Xiaochen were seated in the reception hall, and the old man began to talk about his path in martial arts. He admitted that he had studied martial arts since childhood and had met many teachers, but had never heard of the Little Lord. Xiaochen replied that it took 3 decades to become a master, and another 3 decades to become a grandmaster. So even reaching the Qi cultivation level was already considered a great achievement. Muronghai noticed that he had a request for his guest. As he had long dreamed of finding a real mentor in the art of combat, the man sincerely hoped that Xiaochen would agree to teach him, since he immediately understood what kind of master he had encountered in life. But at that moment, a stranger entered and sharply doubted the young man, saying that he had already seen such impostors more than once. The man expressed the opinion that Muronghai had lost his mind in his old age, since he mistook this guy for a real martial artist. However, Murong Xiaoyu suddenly appeared and was happy to see Xiaochen and couldn't contain her emotions. The lady rushed to him with embraces and with sincere delight said how good it was that fate had brought them together again. Long Jiawen, who had already changed her clothes, looked at Xiaochen with gratitude. Noting his care and attention to her, Muronghai condemned his son's behavior, saying that he should kneel before Master Xiaochen and show respect. However, Murongjing, in a rage, rushed at the young man with his fists, accusing him of deceiving his father and seducing his daughter. Just as the strike was about to hit its target, Xiaochen easily stopped it with 2 fingers, astonishing everyone with his speed and precision of movement. The young man noted with irony that he was facing a very brave man, because with a damaged stomach, such an attack could be dangerous. Murongjing brushed off these words, saying that he would not go back on his words and would fight to the end. However, the next moment he felt ill. He staggered and began to lose his balance, not understanding what was happening to his body. Long Jiawen and Murong Xiaoyu looked at each other in alarm, sensing that something unexpected and frightening was about to happen. Even Murong Hai was shocked, because the events were developing too quickly, and no one had time to comprehend what was happening. His son was confused and wondered if his strength had disappeared, but Xiaochen suggested that it was related to the Hongar style and the tiger form. Xiaochen noticed that Murong Zheng's technique was indeed strong, but he himself was too hasty and moved the qi too quickly. At this moment, Murong Hai angrily clenched his fists and demanded that his son immediately apologize to the master. Murong Zheng reluctantly admitted his mistake and bowed. Although with noticeable internal reluctance, Xiaochen calmly walked up to him and lightly touched his chest with his finger, causing Murong Zheng to involuntarily cry out in pain. However, after a moment, the man felt that his breathing had become free. His chest was no longer constricted, and his internal energy began to circulate freely again. Murong Xiaoyu exclaimed in admiration that her brother was a real genius for being able to help his father so quickly. Murong Hai, amazed by the result, reminded his son that he should kneel before the outstanding master who had done them such a favor. But Murong Zheng frowned and said that he felt something strange about what was happening, and there was a clear doubt on his face. Xiaochen thought that this man was very stubborn, but since he was Murong Xiaoyu's father, it was still worth helping him. So the young man offered to demonstrate the dual form of tiger and crane, an ancient and very effective technique that combines strength and flexibility. Murong Zheng said that even if Xiaochen accidentally helped him, it did not mean that he could now command him, because the tiger and crane technique is the greatest art that takes at least 40 years to master and is only available to the chosen few. But Murong Hai, in irritation, hit his disobedient son on the back of the head and sharply demanded that he stop talking nonsense. Despite this, Murong Zheng continued to insist that he could not believe that such a young master was able to teach him anything. Murong Xiaoyu quietly but firmly reminded him that Xiaochen's actions spoke for themselves, and his father should believe the obvious. Xiaochen, meanwhile, calmly explained that the tiger and crane technique is a form of fist fighting where the most important role is played not by the posture, but by the force of the blow. The guy explained that there is no need to adopt the pose of these creatures. It is enough to direct the power from the depths of the heart so that it resembles the pressure of a tiger and the precision of a crane. The girls watching what was happening were shocked. Their eyes reflected genuine delight and admiration. Even Murong Hai and Murong Zheng held their breath and couldn't believe their eyes, because this young man actually managed to reproduce the legendary technique. Everyone present watched in amazement as the outlines of the legendary forms of the tiger and crane appeared in the air, as if they had come to life from ancient treatises. Xiaochen raised his fist, his gaze focused and full of inner strength, and he could feel the determination of a master. Murong Hai, shocked by what he saw, realized that this was not just a young man standing in front of him, but a person who should be treated with the utmost respect. He knelt down and said that Xiaochen was truly an outstanding master, since he was able to demonstrate a technique that was thought to be lost. Murong Zheng and the girls couldn't help but laugh happily, as what seemed impossible was happening before their eyes. The old man excitedly admitted that, watching the young man, he felt something long forgotten, real inspiration. Murong Xiaoyu, filled with admiration, clung to Xiaochen and admitted that he was truly an incredible person. Murong Zheng, despite everything, still couldn't comprehend how such a young guy could be such a powerful master. Long Jiawen calmly reminded that Xiaochen was not only an outstanding fighter, but also had a rare talent for tempering qi, and she had seen it personally. This confession shocked Murong Xiaoyu and her grandfather even more. They were literally speechless with amazement. Even Murong Zheng was momentarily speechless, realizing what kind of person they were dealing with. Long Jiawen continued and said that Xiaochen was a skilled swordsman. He single-handedly destroyed the people sent by the Wu family, and they even used firearms, but it did not save them. Everyone present was truly stunned, as they did not expect that something like this was even possible in their world. Xiaochen, meanwhile, calmly noted that tempering qi is not as difficult as it might seem at first glance, if you understand the essence. The family members began to whisper among themselves, coming to the conclusion that the young man probably came from a place where such abilities were commonplace, and therefore there was no need to be overly surprised. Murong Xiaoyu said with burning curiosity that she really wanted to know more about the mysterious place he might have come from. Murong Hai responded by saying that according to ancient records, there was a temple located on Mount Kunlun, and every 500 years, one of his disciples would descend into the human world. The man added that even the founder of the Qing Long clan was one of those disciples who had passed the test in this world. Murong Xiaoyu looked at Xiao Chen in astonishment, wondering if he might be one of the people who came from Kunlun. However, the next second, her grandfather hit her on the head and sternly reminded her that asking such questions was inappropriate. After all, each generation of students is given tests, and only those who successfully complete them return with honor. The founder of Qing Long created an influential society and was awarded the elixir of immortality. Celestials often hide their true nature to keep their mission a secret, and the boy will likely never reveal the truth, as revealing his true identity could lead to the failure of his mission. Xiao Chen, meanwhile, turned to Mr. Murong with a question, wondering if his cousin was alive and if he had managed to get any news. Long Jiawen sincerely thanked the young man for not forgetting to ask about her fiancé's fate, despite all the recent events. In response, Murong Hai assured that if he was asked for something, he would do his best to help, especially in such a matter. After this, the old man turned to his son and ordered him to immediately change his clothes and find out at all costs what had happened to Xiao Chen's brother. However, just as Murong Zheng was about to carry out the order, his father stopped him, reminding him that the young man had not thanked the master who had shown him the tiger and crane technique and restored the flow of qi. Xiao Chen replied that it didn't matter because it was a small thing to him, and the guy helped from the bottom of his heart. Murong Hai noticed that the person in front of him was a true master, and that knowledge had to be passed on. Otherwise, it would lose its meaning. After these words, Murong Zheng still turned to Xiao Chen with gratitude and promised that if necessary, he would definitely ask him for help again. Murong Xiaoyu quietly told the young man not to be angry, explaining that her grandfather had been deceived too often, and because of this, her father had become overly cautious. The old man meanwhile turned to his granddaughter and told her to go to him, adding that he needed to talk to the master alone. Murong Hai said that Zheng was the son of his own brother who was killed, and he devoted his entire life to training in order to avenge the deceased. But he hardly became truly stronger, so he decided to ask for help. Xiao Chen noticed that Murong Hai had already achieved considerable success in martial arts and was probably one of the strongest people in the city, so there was no need to strive for more without reason. To this, the old man replied that for him, this was a matter of principle, because there was a person who was superior to him in everything, and his name was Wen Yilian, the head of the Wu family, who had reached the level of a grandmaster. Xiao Chen said that there was nothing wrong with it. He would monitor the situation and keep an eye on him. Murong Hai added that he himself hoped to become stronger if he continued training. But he was really curious about what level Xiao Chen had reached. The hero replied that if one were to judge by their classification, novice mentor, mentor, master, and grandmaster, then he was most likely at the mentor level. The old man grinned and noted that although he was already old, he shouldn't lie to him because he saw with his own eyes what this guy was capable of. Xiao Chen, without going into detail, asked if there were any relics or special items in the Sun Lun Society that could be of use to him. Murong Hai confirmed that, of course, such relics existed, and offered to take the guest to the ancient treasure pavilion to show everything in person. The girls went with them. The pavilion turned out to be ancient, one of the best in Jiangzhou, filled with many antiques, rare artifacts, and healing medicines, the age of which was many years. Murong Hai said that he didn't want to brag at all, but pavilions like this with so many valuable relics were truly rare and almost impossible to come across. Meanwhile, Xiao Chen asked if Murong Xiaoyu was familiar with Long Jiawen. The lady confirmed that, of course, they knew each other, since they were both studying at Jiangzhou University, and the older sister was in the same master's degree course with Long Jiawen. The young man then guessed that perhaps they were also acquainted with Ye Xiaohuan. Long Jiawen immediately said that she knew him for sure, because they went to the same school together, and then to university, and today was the day of the alumni meeting. Murong Xiaoyu enthusiastically invited Xiao Chen to go with them, and he did not refuse. The young man thought that he hadn't seen Ye Xiaohuan for 7 years, and he was really interested to know how he was doing. However, Murong Hai intervened in the conversation, noting that the master should not be called empty-handed. He added that Xiao Chen could choose anything he liked for himself, and with these words he pointed to the table. There were several sealed boxes on the table, each of which contained something incredibly valuable, and each of them could become a great gift. Murong Xiaoyu explained that these boxes were already 100 years old, and her grandfather had always taken special care of them, claiming that if a person was on the verge of death and took one of these pills, his life could be extended for another year. Long Jiawen exclaimed in delight that this was incredible. She had never heard of anything like this. However, Xiao merely noted that this was certainly not bad, but he was more interested in the contents of the boxes, and at that very moment, bright pictograms suddenly appeared in front of him, woven into a complex pattern in which the energies of yin and yang were combined. Hai said that it was forbidden to touch these things. There were divine relics there that belonged to an ancient celestial. Once upon a time, some elders did not believe in spirits and sought to destroy them. The girls watched what was happening in complete confusion, unable to utter a word. They were overcome with awe. Muronghai, meanwhile, said anxiously that the situation was getting out of control. The seal was broken, and now everyone needed to leave the pavilion immediately. But it was too late. The sword burst out, tore through space, and shone dazzlingly, emitting power capable of shaking even the most experienced masters. He quickly headed towards Xiao, who watched his approach calmly, not even making an attempt to dodge. Long Jiawen screamed in horror, asking him to be careful, because this sword was too dangerous and the consequences could be unpredictable. The young man noted with a slight smile that it would be difficult to imagine that one could find an authentic ancient sword in a modern city. Muronghai warned with a serious expression that one must be extremely careful with this sword, as it had absorbed many evil spirits over the centuries, and its power could harm even the most experienced master. But at this moment, Xiao already confidently gripped the handle of the blade, concentrated energy in his palms and closed his eyes, plunging into resonance with the weapon. The guy said that, although with difficulty, he would still be able to subjugate this sword to his will and use its power. His eyes flashed with a bright light. His facial expression became inspired, and his whole figure exuded inner confidence. Muronghai and the two girls couldn't take their eyes off what was happening. They were shocked to the core by what they saw. The next moment, the young man raised his palm, and on it flashed a ring, emitting a glow as bright as that of the sword. He noticed that the sword and ring were quite good, and he could convey his gratitude to the elder of the miraculous elixirs. But Muronghai replied that there was no need for that. He was ready to give the relics for free. Xiao said that he needed to take a short rest somewhere quiet now, and if there were any questions, they would discuss it later. The hero remembered that in his past life, it was precisely because he failed to master the Ursa Major style that he was destroyed. But now, he mastered it perfectly. Meanwhile, in Jiangzhou, at the Wu family mansion, Qing Long reported that his men had failed. They had not even managed to deal with one girl, and Xiao Chen's intervention had completely ruined all their plans. The gentleman demanded to find out where this mysterious enemy was, and stated that it would be necessary to act using dirty methods to catch him alive. At the same time, Xiao Chen was thinking that things were going well. The centuries-old elixirs he had found were ideal for making medicinal pills. The only drawback was the lack of an alchemical furnace, without which he could not begin to prepare them. Suddenly, he felt something unusual, and looking around the room, he caught a subtle change in space. With slight caution, the guy approached the door and resolutely took hold of the handle. When he opened the door, Long Jiawen suddenly appeared in front of him, standing right at the threshold. The girl said with a smile that this time the alumni meeting would be especially solemn. It was decided to hold the event in the most expensive and prestigious restaurant in the city. Xiao Chen was surprised that Murong Xiaoyu would also be present, since she was not their classmate. Murong Xiaoyu explained that she was going along with her sister, and that was only natural. After this, the lady cheerfully noted that at the university there are senior students for every taste. Just like at the market, you can choose anyone. This comparison amused Xiao Chen so much that he could hardly hold back his laughter. The young man finally said that there were 3 pills in his room that could restore vital energy, and they would be quite suitable for Mr. Murong. Muronghai, hearing this, noticed that the young man had amazing skills, as he could transmit sound vibrations through space, and such a skill was truly terrifying. Now even Murongjeng no longer had any doubts. This guy definitely came from the ancient temple, because the ancient relics of the founder could not fall into the hands of an ordinary person. Muronghai, meanwhile, confirmed that he had never doubted Xiao Chen's origins for a moment, and now considered it necessary to be as close to him as possible. At this time, 2 young men, Lu Feng and Jiantan Hao, were standing next to the expensive car. One of them complained that he had difficulty agreeing to meet a beauty and now did not want to lose face. The second one responded by noting that one shouldn't count on her too much. This girl already has a fiancé, and that is the god of war himself, nicknamed Mars. Jiantan Hao muttered thoughtfully that perhaps his friend didn't know, but Mars had recently been recruited by a family that held power in Jiangzhou. Lu Feng was so surprised by this news that he was speechless for a few moments. However, his friend confirmed with a smile that everything would become clear very soon, and while Mars was suffering, he himself would not miss the chance to take advantage of the girl's favor. Meanwhile, the guys had already gotten ready to go to the alumni meeting. Murong Xiaoyu happily waved her hand at them and greeted them cheerfully. The lady enthusiastically told me that these guys were cool seniors, and that in their first year of study they had already been invited to act in films, with Jian Tanhao being especially popular among them. Long Jiawen also greeted her acquaintances with a smile and noted that she hadn't seen them for a long time. Xiao Chen silently watched what was happening. Jian Tanhao was slightly embarrassed by the girl's attention and suggested that he could recommend Sister Xiaoyu to some director. In his heart of hearts, he thought that he wouldn't mind taking the younger girl home and having a little fun. Why not take advantage of the situation? Then the guy gallantly turned to the girl, Xiaoyu, Long Jiwen, and invited them to sit down. However, Murong Xiaoyu sensed a hint of disdain in his tone and noted with displeasure that she was no longer a child. Jin Tanhao chuckled to himself and wished that the girl would not be angry, because in his opinion, this evening would be the night she would finally mature. He then offered to accompany the ladies, sitting next to them in the back seat. At this moment, Murong Xiaoyu pulled Xiao Chen's jacket, bringing him closer to her. The lady firmly stated that she wanted him to sit next to her, so she would feel calmer and more secure. Xiao Chen calmly confirmed her words and agreed to take a place between her friends in order to protect them if necessary. Jian Tanhao gritted his teeth in anger. He never expected this turn of events and was already beginning to regret that this guy had even appeared. Meanwhile, Patriarch Wu learned that Xiao Chen had been absent for 7 years, and then suddenly returned and effortlessly defeated Wu Wenyaliang and the influential Qi family. The guard added that Xiao Chen had a difficult past, but now he had reached the level of a mentor and was able to stop a bullet with his bare hands, and defeating fighters like Wu Wenyalian and Qi Zhang was not difficult for him at all. He also noticed that the head of the Qing Long society, Murong, showed great respect to this guy. Patriarch Wu suggested that perhaps Xiao Chen had visited some forbidden place, since masters of such a level are extremely rare. Then the guy turned around and added that it was necessary to go down to the basement as quickly as possible. In the dungeon, there was a dragon sarcophagus, inside of which rested an ancient sword filled with the power of a dragon, sealed with a golden pill. The fortune and prosperity of the entire family directly depended on this relic, and the inscriptions on the sarcophagus revealed ancient secrets of achieving immortality. In the old days, there was an abundance of spiritual energy and people could achieve perfection. But one day someone used powerful magic to cut off humanity from spirituality, and since then, no one has been able to ascend. But according to the prophecy, once every 900 years order is restored, spiritual energy returns, and a chance appears to transcend the limits of the mundane level and achieve ascension. And although the master did not always believe, the case of the founder of Qing Long is a convincing example. He visited a forbidden place and really returned different. The inscriptions were clearly ancient, and the sword itself was an extraordinary artifact, perhaps having once belonged to a celestial being. Strange sounds began to come from the sword, as if the barrier between heaven and earth had weakened. Perhaps with the help of the sword, it would be possible to achieve what he wanted, and Murong Hai would only be left to envy silently. However, at that moment, the sword suddenly glowed with a blinding light and illuminated the entire space of the basement. The fighters were confused. It became clear that the sword was awakening and they needed to urgently go outside and try to subdue this force. Meanwhile, a black car stopped near a building located in one of the most elite areas of Jiangzhou. Murong Xiaoyu said with admiration that this was the most iconic place in the city, and she said that it should be full of girls. Xiao Chen felt a powerful energy at this moment, very similar to that emanating from a divine sword, and wondered why there were so many such vibrations in the modern world. But the sensation disappeared almost instantly, as if someone had managed to seal the source of power at that very moment. The youth clenched his fists, reminding himself that in his previous life he had almost mastered the Big Dipper style, and this time he was definitely going to find all 7 divine swords. Later, the guy intended to find out where exactly this wave of energy came from. In the meantime, they were greeted by ladies in themed outfits, and from the rabbit-themed costumes it was clear that the event was designed in the spirit of cosplay. The girls joyfully greeted the guests and solemnly announced that they had arrived at the right place. Murong Xiaoyu curiously turned to her companion and asked if he was already in a relationship, to which Xiao Chen calmly replied that he did indeed have a girlfriend once. At this time, the event manager approached them and informed them that the room that Jian Tanhao had booked in advance was already completely ready to receive guests. Meanwhile, the assembled people greeted Jiantan Hao and noticed that he was late. The girl immediately swarmed around him. They were happy because they hadn't seen him for a long time and missed him very much. The ladies approached him and each wanted to hear in as much detail as possible what he was doing. Meanwhile, Murong Xiaoyu also entered the room and happily greeted everyone. The ladies who were there noticed that next to him there was another person whom they did not know. Murong Xiaoyu said that it was her brother Xiao Chen and called them to greet him. The ladies noticed that he had an unusual hair color that suited him very well. The young man was very handsome. Meanwhile, Jintan Hao raised his glass and apologized for being late, and now he needed to drink 3 penalty glasses. Murong Xiaoyu enthusiastically raised her glass and said that of course we should start. Lu Feng raised his glasses to his mouth and continued to slyly stare at all the press openers. Long Jiawen resolutely refused the drink and lowered her gaze, making it clear that she did not intend to participate in this. Jiantan Hao responded by saying that everyone drinks at alumni meetings and that refusal is not possible, as it is supposedly a punishment for being late. The girl hesitated, frozen in indecision for a few moments. But at this moment, Xiao Chen calmly reached for her glass and stopped the situation. The guy said that if she didn't want to drink, he would drink for her. Jiantan Hao could barely contain his anger. This was how many times this person had ruined his plans, and it was already starting to get on his nerves. Xiao Chen, meanwhile, added that Murong Xiaoyu would not drink either, since it was still too early for her. However, the lady expressed dissatisfaction, stating that she was already an adult and wanted to maintain the general atmosphere of fun. Jintan Hao turned to Xiao Chen with a sarcastic expression, asking if he really dared to drink it all by himself. He'd better stop pretending to be someone he doesn't know. Instead of answering, Xiao Chen lowered his head and, without saying a word, looked straight ahead, his expression becoming extremely serious. After saying these words, Xiao Chen calmly picked up a large bottle that was standing nearby on the table. Without a shadow of a doubt, he began to drink it in one gulp, emptying the contents with astonishing speed. Those present froze in amazement. What was happening went beyond the limits of ordinary perception. Jiantan Hao was so shocked that he was speechless for a moment and didn't know how to react. Lu Feng also couldn't believe his eyes. Everything that was happening seemed impossible. However, Xiao Chen actually drank it all down to the last drop without showing the slightest sign of weakness. The guy noted that the taste may not be the best, but it was quite tolerable. Murong Xiaoyu happily expressed her admiration, saying that her little brother was simply amazing and showed top class. Long Jiawen thought with surprise that Xiao Chen resembled the masters of Kunlun, who were famous for their ability to consume alcohol without any consequences. There was applause in the hall. Everyone without exception admitted that he was behaving like the incarnation of Bacchus. Only Jiantan Hao remained dissatisfied, because the evening was not unfolding according to his scenario at all. Arrogantly approaching one of the girls, he coldly inquired about the whereabouts of the security commander named Chen. The girl asked him in response for what purpose he was looking for him. The young man explained that he needed to keep an eye on a guy who, in his opinion, was not feeling well, and asked to call Chen to take care of this matter. He pointed at Xiao Chen, who only calmly and confidently met his gaze in response. The hostess nodded calmly and assured that the request would be fulfilled and that the gentleman had nothing to worry about. Jiantan Hao mentally noted that brother Chen, a gold medalist and a famous fighter, would definitely quickly put this overconfident upstart in his place. At this time, Chen himself was resting in another apartment, surrounded by the attention of several girls. Their meeting was interrupted by a worried hostess who hurried into the room. She reported that someone had taken the liberty of belittling Mr. Jiantan Hao's authority, and now intervention was required to restore justice. Chen was quite surprised to hear that someone dared to act provocatively in his absence, and he became extremely curious about who this daredevil was. The lady explained that the establishment is currently mostly attended by students from the theater university, among whom there are already popular personalities. Chen was clearly delighted. Such companies seemed worthy of attention to him, and the attractiveness of the girls increased his enthusiasm. He firmly declared that he would personally see who dared to oppress Jiantan Hao on their territory. Meanwhile, Xiao Chen sensed the approach of a group of people and became wary, anticipating a conflict. Soon, several people burst into the hall, moving confidently and defiantly. Chen could not hide his admiration for the beauty of the girls present. Jiantan Hao was visibly delighted to see his old friend, and was confident that the situation would now finally change in his favor. He kindly invited Chen to take any comfortable seat and relax. However, he suddenly pushed him aside rudely, causing confusion among everyone present. Chen grinned and asked Murong Xiaoyu a provocative question about her age and whether she had a boyfriend, intending to humiliate and embarrass the girl. When he extended his hands towards her, Murong Xiaoyu was momentarily confused and felt afraid. However, Xiao Chen suddenly intervened, pushing the impudent man's hand away with such force that he recoiled to the side. Chen, enraged by such insolence, declared that such behavior was beyond all bounds. No one had dared to speak out against him before. The fighter angrily added that the guy was asking for it and that it was time to find out which of them was stronger. In response, Xiao Chen said with a cold mockery that he would do better to get out of sight and not interfere. The entire audience froze in tension. Such words seemed extremely provocative and almost reckless. Jian Tanhao muttered that Xiao Chen had completely lost his fear and didn't understand who he was dealing with. Chen declared that this boy was stealing his words, then clenched his fist and swung it, intending to show his superiority. Murong Xiaoyu watched the scene with anxiety, her heart beating faster and faster, the premonition of an upcoming fight frightening her. Long Jiawen was deeply shocked. At that moment, it seemed that Xiao Chen was inferior to Chen in strength, and the situation was about to get out of control. However, the next event happened so quickly that no one had time to react. Xiao Chen gave Chen a powerful slap in the face. Jian Tanhao was stunned. It seemed impossible to him that this guy could defeat his formidable friend. Xiao Chen shook off the hand with disdain, and at this moment he looked truly gloomy and unwavering. Chen lay on the floor, completely disoriented, his mind shattered. He couldn't believe what had happened. Those present froze in shock. Everything looked incredibly impressive and completely unexpected. Even Jian Tanhao didn't know what to do now. All of his self-confidence seemed to have disappeared in an instant. Xiao Chen turned to the people accompanying Chen and guessed that from the stance at the beginning, he was using the Honggar style. Therefore, they were related to the Qing Long society. The bandits confirmed that this was true. They were indeed members of Qing Long and were shocked by this assessment. Xiao Chen calmly ordered Chen to be taken away, promising to personally report everything to Lord Murong. Murong Xiaoyu was indignant and was surprised to see that perhaps the people around her didn't understand who was in front of them and how this guy even dared to raise his hand. Long Jiawen looked at the defeated Jian Tanhao with caution. The lady suggested that the conflict did not arise by chance, but was provoked in advance. Xiao Chen, observing what was happening, noticed that they were clearly not welcome here and was about to leave, but Murong Xiaoyu immediately wanted to go with him. Jian Tanhao couldn't believe it. For the first time in his life, a girl chose him over someone else, and now he intended to humiliate both of them and get them at any cost. Later, the boys arrived at the shopping mall, and Murong Xiaoyu, trying to ease the situation, kindly asked her brother not to be angry. She enthusiastically chose clothes for him, believing that these things would suit her friend very well. But suddenly, a familiar voice was heard. Someone mockingly noted that this coat was from Tianishi, and its price was 16,000. Jian Tanhao entered the hall, again trying to make Xiao Chen look bad. Assuring him that he could not afford such luxury, Lu Feng hastened to intervene, hoping to settle the brewing conflict. However, Jian Tanhao was determined. He pulled his hand away and approached the boys. Murong Xiaoyu turned to the boy, expressing surprise at his disdainful attitude towards others, adding that even if someone couldn't afford something, it didn't mean they were worthless. However, instead of answering, Jian Tanhao took out a map and remarked that it was precisely for this reason that he did not feel the need to explain. The guy said he wanted to buy all the clothes on the left side of the store and asked the salesperson to pack everything up. Lu Feng only sighed heavily, realizing that objections here were completely useless. Meanwhile, the gentleman showed off a watch from Paybori, worth 100,000. He also wore a Tiffany suit and Alubo trousers, which also indicated his incredible wealth. The shoes, custom made in Europe, cost a total of 300,000, a truly incredible purchase, and also a Citibank card with a credit limit of 10 million. All this confirmed that being rich was really wonderful, so he invited the girls to come back with him and have a drink after all. However, Murong Xiaoyu noticed that wealth itself was not a rare thing, and Jian Tanhao was only trying to give the impression that they were not interested at all. Xiao Chen meanwhile remarked that they should just go to another store since there were no decent items here. At this very moment, Jian Tanhao turned to the salesman and declared that he wanted to buy all the goods in the room. The lady replied that this was extremely unexpected and asked if she had heard wrong. Jian Tanhao repeated his request and added that he could easily afford it. The girls, meanwhile, suggested that he probably just had nothing better to do, and that such behavior was already going beyond the bounds of reason. Lu Feng noticed that his friend had never acted at his own expense before, and it seemed that he was now driven solely by emotions, and Xiaochen suddenly thought that he might be jealous. Suddenly, a man entered the room, and his appearance made everyone perk up. The man approached Miss Murong and asked if he could find out if she still needed the suit she had just put aside. Xiaochen realized with surprise that this was the same clothes he had worn when he returned from the Celestial Realm. Murong Xiaoyu confirmed his guess, noticing that these clothes really belonged to him. The man said that if this suit really belonged to the gentleman, then he sincerely wanted to meet its owner. He introduced himself as the chairman of the Pure Pearl Society, Yu Rongcheng, and said that he was pleased to meet him and would like to purchase this item for a modest 100 million. Jian Tanhao and Lu Feng's jaws simply dropped when they heard this, as it was beyond their comprehension. Murong Xiaoyu had the same reaction. She was completely shocked, because she didn't expect anything like this. Long Zhaowen was speechless for a moment, because what she heard seemed simply unbelievable to her. Meanwhile, Murong Hai decided to use the magic pill that sparkled with a bright blue hue. A shimmering aura appeared around the old man, gradually filling the entire space. This power spread throughout the body, through the vessels and veins like warm oil. It was unthinkable. He wondered what kind of miraculous pill that master had given him that could cause such a powerful surge of strength. But suddenly Murong Zheng entered the room and addressed his father, reminding him that he had asked him to pass something on to old man Chen. The man explained that he had indeed taken that very pill, but his daughter was with him. Murong Hai concluded that he probably knew about the exceptional properties of the medicine, so he definitely needed to see him. At the moment when his friend was about to open the bottle of medicine, he heard his granddaughter warn him, suggesting that it could be poison. However, he replied that Yu was wrong. This medicine was not made using modern technology, had no side effects, and was most likely created during the time of the Celestials. Murong Hai, who had come over at that time, confirmed that this was the true truth. The medicine was indeed made by a master who came from the ancient temple, and it was necessary to be close to him. The old man expressed confidence that, looking into the future, they should distract the master from others and try to lure him to their side. Cheng, as well as his granddaughter, were shocked, as they did not fully believe that this man could be so capable. Meanwhile, the crowd gathered in the shopping center expressed obvious surprise that these clothes really cost 100 million. Jian Tanhao turned to Yu Rongcheng, saying that he was obviously mistaken, since such rags could not possibly be worth that much. But the man replied that, firstly, they didn't even know the young man, and secondly, in that case, he shouldn't have shown up here at all. The guy explained that he was from the Jian Union and was sure that the young man was a swindler, so he warned Yu Rongcheng out of concern. However, the chairman did not even listen to him and ordered that this guy be removed from sight immediately. Jian Tanhao panicked and realized that perhaps his uncle had been bewitched, since that guy was definitely a crook. But the guards had already told him to shut up because the consequences could be extremely serious. The next second they approached the guy, who was resisting with all his might and could not believe that he was being thrown out. Yu Rongcheng meanwhile tiredly wiped the sweat from his forehead. This annoying guy's behavior had really pissed him off. Xiaochen meanwhile noticed that the gentleman probably wanted to talk to him about something. He said that when he accidentally touched Xiaochen's suit, the symptoms of his illness suddenly disappeared, which is why he wanted to buy the clothes. Murong Xiaoyu noted in amazement that it sounded unbelievable, but her brother's suit really did seem to be very expensive. However, the young man replied that this suit was not for sale. He was very sorry, but alas. After this, the guy turned around and without looking back walked away, raising his hand up in a farewell gesture. And the suit that belonged to the young hero was approaching him irreversibly, as if driven by an unusual force. Under the influence of magic, the clothes immediately disappeared, rushing straight into the ring. Yu Rongcheng watched what was happening in amazement and couldn't believe his own eyes. Xiaochen meanwhile noted that if they had not appropriated these clothes for themselves, but simply kept them until his return, then now they should act according to their conscience. He was ready to help cure the disease. Yu Rongcheng couldn't believe it, because the doctors had already written him off. But as soon as he touched his clothes, he immediately felt relief. The young hero replied that there was nothing complicated about it, and the enthusiastic gentleman declared that if he was really cured, he would be indebted to this guy for the rest of his life. Meanwhile, in the Zhangzhou area, Qizhen declared that his father simply had to avenge him because what happened was unthinkable to him. However, Qiqiang, the boy's father, remarked that he simply didn't expect his son to be so easily damaged with one blow and suggested that he might really be talentless. But revenge is still necessary, And if the enemy does not want to show himself, then they themselves will go after him. Their family became rich by studying the techniques of the 5 demons, which are passed down from generation to generation. And thanks to them, the real estate company's stock is soaring. This spirit, a 1,000-year-old warrior known for his ferocious nature, was given the nickname of a battle demon and was summoned to grandfather Xiang to avenge the boy. The young man remarked with delight that it was simply magnificent, and his eyes sparkled with a dangerous light. At that very moment, a battle demon appeared in the room, and Qiang ordered it to find Xiaochen and kill him. The dark creature responded fiercely that it was ready to carry out the order. Meanwhile, Xiaochen had another very important meeting coming up. Yu Rongcheng introduced his daughter Xiao, who currently served as the general manager of Yangjijiang Association. The girl looked closely at the hero and asked who he was. The father noticed that she was acting too dismissively, because in front of them was Master Chen, the owner of the miraculous suit, who agreed to heal him. The hero said that to perform acupuncture he would need several silver needles, and if they had spiritual stones, they could take several of them as well. Murong Xiaoyu noted that it was very unexpected. It turns out that her little brother can heal, and Long Jiawen added that it was impressive, because he also uses acupuncture. Xiaochen explained that in the past, warriors not only trained but also improved their health, learned to heal others, prepare medicines, and do acupuncture. Meanwhile, Xiao angrily turned to her father, doubting the wisdom of his decision. Because this guy does not even have a medical license and is clearly a fraud who cannot be trusted. The girl added that he would not be able to cure the disease because even the best doctors could not cope with it. In response to this, Xiaochen remained silent, and his companions were somewhat surprised by this reaction. Yu Rongcheng, having given in to his daughter's doubts, remarked that he would still like to clarify to what extent the master could do acupuncture. Xiaochen admitted that he was not very successful in acupuncture, but if there was no trust, then treatment could be done with the help of spiritual stones. Yu Rongcheng replied that this was good, but he had absolutely no idea what spiritual stones were. The hero explained that these were ancient jade pellets, mined in the great mountains of the region, which contained supernatural power in the realm of martial arts. Yu Rongcheng noticed that he had a lot of jades, and asked his daughter to bring some. Murong Xiaoyu was furious and noted that this gentleman was very bad, because he didn't trust his brother, although he agreed out of the kindness of his heart to help him heal. Long Jiawen added that they can also understand Xiaochen is very young, so it is hard to believe that he has mastered the practice of acupuncture. Meanwhile, the young man decided to take a little rest and thought that he had previously felt a very strong energy from the sword. But now he felt almost nothing. At this very moment, something unexpected happened. Xiao instantly became wary. Xiaochen immediately felt something was wrong and his heart began to beat wildly. A demon appeared before the boys and demanded that Xiaochen come out, stating that his death had already come. Murong Xiaoyu clung to her friend in horror, not understanding what kind of monster had appeared right in front of them. The guy calmed them down, explaining that it was the restless spirit of a 1,000-year battle, the spirit of a warrior who died on the battlefield. Xiao and her father were completely stunned and froze in fear. The next moment, the girl sharply called for security to come here immediately. The demon, meanwhile, noticed that there were very beautiful women here, and considered this a clear plus. He even thought that it would be nice to rip off the beautiful skin of one of them. The thought alone made his body crawl. But the girl looked at him intently, and her eyes widened with fear and horror. Just when the disaster seemed irreversible, Xiaochen decisively pulled the enemy aside. The guy couldn't understand where such a cruel wandering spirit came from in this place. The demon noted that the battle promised to be exciting, since Xiaochen was able to repel attacks. And he also said that some people even died just from the feeling of the spirit of death emanating from him. But there is clearly another strong fighter standing in front of him. The young man replied that in front of him was only a spirit who could not be reborn. It was very sad, but he intended to help him. The spirit asked contemptuously if this was true. After all, he had been to many places, and even in hell no one accepted him. But instead, they gave him shelter in the Qi family. Now he is a celestial being. Then the demon noticed that there was no place for him anywhere, and the little man standing next to him claims that he can help him. It sounds funny. Xiao was completely shocked. Yu Rongcheng was also in a daze. Murong Xiaoyu was terrified. But Long Jiawen said that there was no need to be afraid. She was confident that Xiaochen would defeat the enemy. Her mentor, meanwhile, said that the demon would go to the underworld without them even having to make an effort. The demon laughed hollowly and noted that this was the best joke in all the 1,000 years of his existence. He doubted that this guy could really cope with the celestial. Xiao Chen responded by concentrating energy in his hands and saying that one should always hold on until the end. Then the boy opened his eyes and looked straight ahead with a determined gaze. The young man used an ice execution, which made everyone present startle. The demon couldn't believe his eyes. An ability of this level was truly amazing. Meanwhile, Xiao Chen resolutely and firmly spoke out every word, ordering the enemy to get away, go to the underworld, and finally be reborn. The opponent said nothing in response to this remark, but his gaze was no longer so determined. A moment later, he fell to his knees and thanked him for his mercy, promising to do whatever Xiao Chen ordered, sincerely regretting having disturbed him. Meanwhile, a luxurious red car pulled up near the building. The man inside felt some confusion. It was very strange, because they were making sacrifices to the battle demon, and he just up and left. Meanwhile, Yu Rongcheng sincerely thanked Xiao Chen for his timely intervention. If it weren't for him, his daughter would have already died. Now the man had no doubt that Xiao Chen was truly strong and could deal with the spirit of a 1,000-year battle. Xiao Xiao was somewhat surprised to find that she couldn't believe it. Could it really have been a dream? Meanwhile, Murong Xiaoyu turned to her little brother and asked if she understood correctly that the enemy was called a battle demon. He replied that yes, it was an evil demon that needed to devour several souls every year in order to continue to exist. Yu Rongcheng had heard of this before. They actually had sharp jade stones, which he had specifically requested from the Taoist temple at Mount Longhu. Xiao Xiao, meanwhile, showed the glittering ingots and asked if they would work. Xiao Chen looked at them carefully and replied that they could hardly be considered spiritual stones. But still, such stones are difficult to obtain in the modern world. And with these words, the guy threw one of the stones on the ground. The hero noted that Yu Rongcheng would need to meditate in this circle for 2 hours every day, and then his illness would recede. Xiao Xiao, meanwhile, sat down on the floor and tried to pick up the stone in her hands, but she was unable to do so. The ingot seemed to be glued to the floor, and what kind of skill it was remained a mystery. Yu Rongcheng, meanwhile, noticed that he was overcome by a wonderful feeling, as if a powerful energy was moving through his body. This was the supernatural ability. He wanted to ask the master what it was called, but Xiao Chen had already disappeared from sight. Already on the street, the guy noticed that someone had set a battle demon on him, from which the energy of Qijian emanated. Murong Xiaoyu noticed that these people were in the real estate business, and it seemed that he was killing a couple of people in each new building. This was in order to use his 5-demon technique. Xiao Chen said that he should go home and rest today, and tomorrow he would go to visit the Qi family. Just as the boys were walking towards home, Xiao Xiao caught up with them and asked them to wait. Xiao Chen turned around in surprise, completely confused about what else she wanted. The girl said that she had behaved very badly recently, but asked the master not to hold a grudge against her. The lady handed him a business card and said that if he needed anything, he could call her at any time. Although the Yang-Jijiang unification may not be as significant in Jiangzhou, it does have some influence. The lady also introduced her driver, who could take them home, and said that her father would probably feel better soon and that he would visit them personally someday and thank them. The hero said that it was okay. He understood everything. He needed to go to the Qing Long dojo, and with these words he headed towards the car. When the young man arrived, he was introduced to the president of the board of directors, Cheng Haifeng, who owned the largest pharmaceutical factory, and they had come here specifically to discuss cooperation. Murong Xiaoyu instantly became wary and thought that this cooperation was just an attempt to use her brother. Murong Hai angrily shouted at his granddaughter, noting that when adults talk, children should remain silent, and suggested that the ladies should leave. Long Jiawen took the reluctant Murong Xiaoyu and said that it was really better for them to leave now. Meanwhile, a girl approached Xiao Chen and introduced herself as the general director of the company, Chen Peiyu. The lady noted that they wanted to discuss with him the issue of cooperation regarding such pills and offer dividends in the amount of 50% of the profits. He only needed to tell him how to produce these pills. Cheng Haifeng said that he was a good friend of Murong Hai and that the pill Xiao Chen had made was of the highest quality and should be mass-produced to earn a huge profit. The guy replied that it was all tempting, but he wasn't really interested in money. Peiyu was extremely surprised. Cheng Haifeng asked in amazement what this meant and why he had such a position. The ladies suggested that perhaps 50% was not enough, and then they were ready to offer 70% plus an advance payment of 10 million. In response to Xiao Chen's willingness to triple the amount, he refused and repeated again that he was not interested in money. Murong Hai noticed that the master had clearly expressed himself. Money was like dust to him. 30 million. It was clearly not enough. Chen Haifeng was determined and said that even if this did not suit him, he was ready to offer a valuable gift. For example, his daughter as a bride, of course, if the young master agrees. Muronghai was speechless for a moment, as he couldn't even imagine such a thing. Peiyu was embarrassed and noticed that her father was clearly talking nonsense. The hero at this time was completely taken aback, since he could not even imagine that he would be invited to become a son-in-law. Muronghai, meanwhile, was seething with anger and asked what kind of jokes this was. "I don't understand at all." After that, he shouted at his friend, asking what kind of son-in-law Master Xiao Chen was a respected guest, and he planned to lure him away right before his eyes. After that, an incredible fight broke out between the two. Chen Haifeng noticed that the master was not Muronghai's property, and he probably also dreamed of making him his son-in-law. Xiao Chen decided to intervene in the conversation and noted that, as he had already said, he was not interested in money, but he was very interested in spiritual stones and ancient swords. He added that his pill was created through internal force, and if an ancient alchemical furnace could be found to make it, he could make more. Peiyu turned to him and said that the house their family lived in had been passed down through the generations for centuries, and that they had the stove that the friend was talking about. And if he had time, the guy could come in and take a look at it. Muronghai warned Master Xiao Chen not to go there because it was clearly a devious plan. They would lock him up there, force him to marry Peiyu, and then what would he do? Chen Haifeng responded by saying that his friend was talking absolute nonsense. No one was going to do such a thing, and Murong probably wanted to propose his granddaughter to him. After that, they started fighting each other again, and Xiao Chen just watched it with confusion. The young man noted that he needed to rest now, and later they would discuss everything. Chen Haifeng, meanwhile, begged the master not to leave, saying that in addition to Peiyu, he had 5 more lovely granddaughters. At this moment, the lady became even more embarrassed and looked down. Muronghai pointed out that Chen shouldn't be trusted, because among the granddaughters, only Peiyu was beautiful, and the rest were no good. Xiao Chen grabbed his head and realized how tired he was from all this fuss and matchmaking. Murong Xiaoyu suddenly spoke to him, and the guy became wary because there was excitement in her voice. The lady suddenly admitted that she had never been in love, and it sounded like a hint. However, this statement was the last straw, and Xiao Chen thought that maybe he should just leave. He rushed forward down the corridor, hoping that no one would stop him or try to look into his soul. Murong Xiaoyu called after him, asking him to wait, but Xiao Chen didn't even look back, disappearing into the far end of the hall. The girl was upset and asked if he really didn't love any of them. But Long Jiawen said that Xiao Chen was already in love. Murong Xiaoyu was surprised and asked with genuine interest who this lucky girl was. Long Jiawen frowned slightly as she replied that she didn't know for sure, but the worry in her eyes was more telling than her words. Meanwhile, Xiao Chen reached the forest and thought that perhaps he should find a new place to live before he was made a son-in-law. But suddenly the guy felt someone's presence nearby, and this made him tense up and stop instantly. Before him stood a demon who said that he wanted to be reborn, but was unable to because so many people died at his hand. Xiao Chen pointed out that in that case, he could knock all the spirit out of him and then everything would work out. The demon fell to his knees and said that it was not necessary. He was asking for mercy because he was very unhappy after killing 100 people on the battlefield, so he could not calm down. The Qi family gave him food for many thousands of people. That's why he became what he is now. If the demon doesn't cause hostility in the master, then he would very much like to accompany him. The guy wanted to know what happened to the other 4 spirits, and heard that the families that brought a lot of evil to mere mortals were now helping their family commit crimes by eliminating competitors. In the abandoned house of the Qi family, there is a large area called the 5 Spirits area, which is where they made their fortune, becoming the largest real estate developers. There are several ancestors in the family who are 100 years old. They master the Maoshan technique. Their level of skill is high, they do not participate in crimes, but hone their secret techniques in practice, which are very strong. Xiao Chen asked back directly with doubt. He didn't really believe it, and the demon suspected that the ancestors were very angry with him. The young man said that in any case he needed to rest now, and tomorrow they would go to these ancestors. The Big Dipper style requires 7 swords, and while he only has 1, he will have to find the rest. In his previous life, Xiao Chen didn't understand why ordinary people would get stuck at the 8th level when cultivating and not advance any further. Only now did the hero realize that the line between heaven and earth had become thinner, and it was simply impossible for mortals to reach the highest levels. Whether he will still have a path to sword mastery in this life is a rhetorical question. In any case, He will have to bring each level to the ideal, eliminate all the flaws before daring to strive for the sky. Meanwhile, Xiang bowed respectfully before his ancestor and began to tell about the misfortunes that had befallen their family. Despite the fact that they possessed spirits, the enemies were able to defeat them, and this circumstance seemed almost impossible. The ancestor stated that these spirits are unusual. They come from the realm of immortals, and not every warrior is able to cope with them. However, someone was found who was able to defeat one of these spirits, and this poses a threat to their plans. Xiang cried and guessed that this person was a guy named Chen, who had recently appeared in the area. The ancestor was clearly surprised and asked who this young man was and how he managed to achieve such a result. Xiang revealed that Chen was also called Beidou and was incredibly strong, so the family was now in great danger. The next morning, the guy realized that it was the purple mist that suited him best, and now all that was left was to find a suitable method that would allow him to regain his lost power as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, Murong Xiuyu arrived to tell him that the boss from the Pure Pearl clan himself was standing at the gate of the house. Long Jiawen added that Cheng Haifeng and his daughter had arrived with him, and Murong Xiaoyu was extremely indignant about this. She irritably noted that they again wanted something from Xiao Chen. The young man did not yet understand what all these people had forgotten here, and why their appearance coincided with his awakening. Murong Xiaoyu emphasized that they only wanted to get closer to him because he had become the strongest in the area, and bitterly admitted that she used to think of Cheng Haifeng as a good senior, but she no longer did. Murong Zheng suddenly entered the room and announced that he had managed to find out something about Qing Long. The young hero and his companion immediately tensed up because they felt that important news was about to be heard. Murong Zheng said that the guy was on a mission in the northwest where he was surrounded by many enemies. According to reliable information, Qing Long was seriously injured there and died, not wanting to surrender. At this moment, Long Jiawen couldn't hold back her tears because what she heard was too tragic. Chen sincerely expressed his condolences. He understood how difficult it was for his friend at this moment. Murong Zheng added that, according to the same information, Wu Wenyalian sold information about Qing Long to the enemy. Knowing about his mission, after the information leaked, the guy was ambushed by a group of mercenaries, and this led to his tragic death. Chen's eyes flashed with a cruel look, and he noticed that it seemed like he would have to visit the Wu family today, not just Qi. However, first he had to go out to the guests, who were already impatiently awaiting the hero in the spacious hall of the mansion. Yu Rongcheng said that Chen's pharmacy was incredible. Just an hour of meditation gave him a noticeable surge of energy. He admitted that he doubted him at first, but now he repents and hopes that the guy does not hold a grudge. Today the man wants to try the acupuncture method. Xiao also admitted that she was too harsh with him and regrets her previous behavior in front of him. Chen replied with a smile that there was no need to worry. It was a trifle and did not deserve serious attention. At this moment, new guests arrived. Jiantan Hao's father, named Shan. He told them what their family was doing and noticed that his son had offended Chen, so he came in person to express his apology. Jiantan Hao forced out words of forgiveness, although it was clearly not easy for him. Murong Xiaoyu noted with irritation that the young man didn't even try to pretend to be sincere in his words. Chen glanced at Long Jiawen, who was still in shock and unable to cope with the pain that was surging through her. The guy noticed that he was in a bad mood today, so he asked all the guests to leave. Yu Rongcheng nodded in understanding and said that he would disturb Master next time when it was more appropriate. Shan was taken aback for a moment because the situation was becoming awkward. Even offering money to this hero was useless. At this moment, Chen gently placed his hand on Long Jiawen's shoulder and quietly said that he sincerely regretted the loss. He then thoughtfully said that perhaps it would be a good idea to go to where Kunlun's body was resting. Murong Zheng confirmed that he knew this place and immediately invited the master to follow him. The boys moved forward in that direction to honor the memory of their fallen friend. At this time, Jiantan Hao looked at them with an angry expression, determined to take revenge at all costs. However, Yu Rongcheng pointed out that he shouldn't look at the young master like that. He declared that from now on, Pure Pearl would no longer have anything to do with the Gien family. Tan Hao's father tried to object, insisting that his son had not said anything bad. But Yu Rongcheng was adamant that all business ties with their family would be terminated. Xiao followed her father without objection, saying that she understood everything. Yu Rongcheng added that Jiantan Hao should forget about Master Xiao. There was an unbridgeable gap between them. These words only increased Tan Hao's rage, and he vowed to destroy Chen. Meanwhile, the guys reached the cemetery where Qing Long was buried. They stood silently at the grave, and Long Jiwen walked closer. The girl could not hold back her tears and burst into tears in despair. Xiaochen asked Murongjeng if the Wu family had any influence in the military. Murongjeng replied that the Wu family was engaged in international trade and had many contacts with foreign enterprises. Xiaochen noted that he needed to convey a message to the family. Have them deliver Wu Wenyaliang to personally apologize at Xiao Kunlun's grave. The guy added that he could only atone for his guilt with his own life. If he didn't commit suicide on the spot, the whole family would be destroyed. Meanwhile, several people gathered at the Wu family's estate, and Patriarch Wu passed on everything he knew. He said that he had recently received a call from Murongjeng, who demanded that he bring Wu Wenyalian. The young gentleman said in anger that he must definitely be avenged. Patriarch Wu noted that this was not up for discussion, and Masters Qi and Gien were also extremely dissatisfied. He added that he had recently obtained the magic sword and had already reached the peak of the Qi refining realm. Qichang admitted that this was indeed a powerful weapon worthy of respect. He then congratulated Boss Wu, calling him the new #1 master in Jiangzhou. Jian Tanhua happily noticed that Uncle Wu was indeed reliable and had to eliminate Xiaochen. Patriarch Wu asked his boss why his son had managed to annoy Xiaochen. He replied that children may be ignorant, but since they belonged to this city, it was their duty to inform all interested parties of any potential threats. Jian Tanhua added that Uncle Wu, the ruler of all of Jiangzhou, also has close ties with the Jiang family, so he can count on their support in case of any unexpected events. The patriarch thought that the Jiang family were weak upstarts who had just gotten lucky, and it was unclear why they thought they had any weight. But he only said out loud that the Wu gang, the Chen family, and the Pure Pearl Association had already taken Xiaochen's side. He also added that Jiangzhou was too small for 2 predators, and the Wu family was willing to dedicate 6 masters, including himself, to eliminate this threat at an early stage. It is also possible to involve masters from the Jiang and Qi families in this process, so they would have more than a dozen fighters on their side, and Xiaochen would not be able to handle such an onslaught, especially considering that another surprise was waiting for him. At this time, at the cemetery, Xiaochen supported his friend and said that he was very sorry. The girl confessed that she and Xiao Kunlun had an agreement to get married in 3 years, but now everything has come to an end. Murong Xiaoyu pointed out that her sister needed to remain strong no matter how hard things were. She did not understand why fate separated lovers, and considered it unfair and sad. Xiaochen remembered that the same thing happened to him when Qijian pushed him off the cliff for Ye Xiaohun. He didn't know where his beloved was now and what had happened to her. Murong Hai suddenly approached him and said that after consuming the pill, he was able to break through to the Qi Purification realm, the first time in 70 years of practice that he had crossed 2 boundaries at once. Cheng Haifeng added that he also took the pill and then broke through to the same realm. Xiaochen explained that they had both practiced since childhood, but due to the lack of spiritual energy in the world, they were unable to overcome critical points, and his remedy only served as a catalyst. The guy then asked if anyone knew of any cultivators who could travel to other worlds or had similar abilities, because if he himself had returned, perhaps others could do it too, and he needed to be prepared. Murong Hai said that no family in their surroundings had ever encountered anything like this. Cheng Haifeng noted that his family had been practicing medicine for many years, but also had no contact with immortals, but the records left by their ancestors mentioned practitioners, and they could live up to 200 years. If there was someone like Master Xiao in the world, then there were probably other immortals who had simply not shown themselves yet. Murong Hai doubted the old man's words, considering them nonsense, but admitted that at one time there were also masters in the Patriarch Wu gang, which meant that there could be other places in the world like the temple on the mountain, where spiritual energy is preserved. Xiaochen agreed. There were probably many hidden places and strong people in the mountains. He even felt that there was a concentration of spiritual energy in those areas that was suitable for cultivation. The old man asked with interest what he meant by good places. The guy explained that he felt echoes of not human, but animal energy, probably belonging to mutated creatures, possibly monsters or werewolves. The old man confirmed his guess. Werewolves were mentioned in ancient records, and in their youth they themselves had encountered such a creature. Xiaochen came to the conclusion that this was a great opportunity. He was worried about the lack of spiritual energy and resources, but now he realized that he just needed to find these monsters and fight them. Friends considered that he was truly worthy of being called a disciple of the ancient temple, because many showed respect for such creatures, and the guy was ready to fight them without hesitation. Meanwhile, Xiao Chen advised his friend to stop being sad. Qing Long was dead and could not be brought back, but they must continue to live and avenge him. That's why the guy said that he was teaching her how to properly handle a sword, because one day she would use these skills in practice to avenge her fiancé herself. He added that he would definitely pass on the sword technique to her. And to confirm his words, he made a stick lying nearby move. When a swordsman's skill reaches a sufficient level and his heart becomes ruthless, even a simple branch can become a deadly weapon capable of facing a crowd. At this moment, Muronghai and Cheng Haifeng listened attentively, trying not to miss a single word. Xiao Chen explained that the technique was called merciless sword. It was very powerful and highly effective. To master it, you need to get rid of all distracting thoughts, leaving only the sword and moving forward. With these words, the hero suddenly threw the branch forward with all his might. The next moment, she crashed into a tree, and what happened left everyone in shock. Long Jiawen stood frozen, stunned, unable to move. Muronghai couldn't believe his eyes. What he saw seemed impossible. Cheng Haifeng said that he now understood that the master only used the power of sword technique without resorting to any other tricks. Muronghai noticed that Xiao Chen didn't use any techniques or blocks at all. He didn't even have any fixed movements, which meant that what was displayed before them was pure, innate talent. Long Jiawen calmed down a little and thanked the master, but he asked her to call him by his first name and asked if she understood the essence of the training. The girl lowered herself and brought her hand closer to the stick lying on the ground. And after that, she stood up and confidently said that she would do everything possible. Murong Xiaoyu walked up to her brother and said that she also wanted to learn martial arts. Muronghai noticed that he had proposed this to her many times before, but she had refused. Cheng Haifeng chuckled, guessing that the lady refused not because she didn't want to, but because Hai's level of combat skill left much to be desired. The old men glanced at each other angrily, and the next second they began to argue again. At this moment, Peiyu approached Xiao Chen and said with determination in her voice that she also wanted to learn martial arts. Yu Rongcheng thought that this girl was clearly trying to charm the master with her beauty, so he pushed his daughter forward with determination, hoping that she would also be able to make an impression. Xiao Xiao said that she also wants to become his disciple and promises to do her best. Thus, all the girls expressed their desire to learn from Xiao Chen and promised to achieve success in martial arts. Xiao Chen was slightly embarrassed. Did all four of them really want him to be their mentor? However, after thinking for a while, the guy decided that he didn't want to take on students. He remembered events from the past when he learned a hard lesson that would forever remain in his memory. Back then, the young man trained Mo Ling Er and Ye Xiaotian. But in the end, it was they who betrayed him, which he could not forget. Even if a sword can crush any enemy, it is powerless against the betrayal lurking in someone's heart. Xiao Xiao said that her skills were far from perfect, but she was willing to try until the very end, even if it took 7 years in a row. Peiyu added that she has been practicing martial arts since childhood and already has some skills. The guy noted that he was ready to teach them, but this did not mean that he accepted anyone as a student and would prefer to maintain the previous relationship. Learning martial arts is a good idea. Even if their level doesn't allow them to fly under the sky, they can still easily cut a tree or split a stone. Meanwhile, the old men asked the young man to give them some instructions. Yu Rongcheng also admitted that he would like to learn some of the techniques that the master uses. Murong Xiaoyu noticed that everyone was asking for too much. Her brother simply wouldn't be able to do everything at once. Long Jiawen said that Xiao Chen was not afraid to challenge several influential families in Jiangzhou for her and Qing Long, and she didn't know how to thank him for that. The hero replied that if injustice came his way, he was obliged to take out his sword and destroy it. And if his friend really wanted to express his gratitude, she should remember the sword technique he showed her and the words he said. Soon the group of boys approached the fierce opponents. Opposite them stood a crowd of angry people led by Patriarch Yu. Jin Tanhao pointed at Xiao Chen and stated that it was he who turned Qi Jian and Wu Wenyalian into invalids. Murong Hai noted that old man Wu had completely lost his mind to even think of calling the police to deal with Xiao. He responded by stating that he had many witnesses to Xiao Chen's actions, and that the young man had seriously harmed their family. Cheng Haifeng intervened, saying that there was clearly some misunderstanding going on. Yu Rongcheng added that he was willing to vouch for Master Chen because he was not at all like the man they were trying to pass him off as. Jian Tanhao, addressing the police, emphasized that they were facing an extremely dangerous criminal with martial arts skills and called for them to use all possible measures to detain him. The boy clenched his teeth in anger. deciding that now he would return every slap he had ever received. Xiang added that this was not just a dangerous criminal, but a much more serious threat. He accused Chen of taking the chairman of Pure Pearl and his daughter hostage. In addition, he stated that the three ladies who were next to the guy also effectively became his hostages, falling under his influence. Xiang added that as the president of the board of directors of the Chengxi Association, he could no longer remain silent about what was happening. In fact, Chen had taken Patriarch Wu's entire gang hostage. If he delayed, the guy might subjugate even more people, and then it would be impossible to detain him. The only way out was to immediately eliminate Chen right on the spot. The guy, meanwhile, silently and intently watched him and remained silent. Murong Xiaoyu was indignant. Obviously, her brother couldn't take anyone as a hostage. On the contrary, it was Qizhan who attacked him first. Long Jiawen confirmed that Wu Wenyalian himself was the criminal who sent people to capture her, and it was only thanks to Chen's intervention that she survived. Murong Hai noticed that Qiang had come prepared. Patriarch Wu responded by saying that such a scoundrel deserved to die long ago. He added that their version now is that Chen allegedly took hostages, but, finding himself surrounded by police, he realized the hopelessness of the situation and dealt with them, after which he was shot himself. The police officer gave the order to all his henchmen to obey immediately. No one present should leave the scene. He then pointed to the crowd standing in front of him. The police immediately loaded their weapons, indicated that they understood the instructions, and indicated that they were ready to carry out the order. Behind them, a crowd of guys gathered who came with them and decided that they had to take part in this matter. There was a roar in the sky, and a helicopter slowly began to approach the scene, heading straight for the guy. Chen realized that this was all part of a larger plan designed solely to eliminate him. Patriarch Wu said that the Eastern Territory was founded by the 9 Emperor's masters who united in ancient times. Their family is the guardian of this legacy, they have countless weapons on their side, and Chen will have nowhere to escape. However, at that moment he suddenly froze, because he sensed the approach of a dangerous enemy. Patriarch Wu began to wheeze and could barely breathe because Chen had grabbed his neck and was holding it with a death grip. The boy thought that Patriarch Wu was talking too much, so he grabbed him and started shaking him in the air. The unfortunate man tried to beg for mercy, but Chen paid no attention and continued to squeeze his neck. After that, Chen suddenly pushed his opponent aside, and Patriarch Wu flew several meters away. The boy noticed with disgust that in his eyes, this man was just a useless and pathetic ant. Patriarch Wu fell to the ground with a crash, and thick, slowly settling clouds of dust rose up around his body. One of the policemen could not stand it and exclaimed that it was unthinkable to treat one of the 9 masters in this way. Chen replied that he had heard of these 9 masters before and even knew quite a bit about them. Long ago, on Mount Kunlun, there were 9 ancient coffins in which Emperor Wu's confidants were buried. These 9 masters were the first rulers of the country, fighting for it in the south and north, annexing lands. Emperor Wu later founded 9 eastern provinces and placed them under the control of these 9 masters. He dreamed that the East would become the most peaceful territory in the country, and he handed over power to the hands of proven warriors. The old people always hoped for the youth, but if the young are weak, then they must be torn out by the roots without mercy. This opinion seemed fair, because there was evidence that they were buying up real estate at bargain prices. They threatened the owners that they will start demolition without consent, while the Jiang family is engaged in car smuggling. Gien Tanhao said in a daze that everything he said was complete nonsense, and Qiang broke out in cold sweat. Chen clarified that the East is divided into 9 ancient regions, and they are ruled by the strongest families. Each of these provinces must be represented by a clan of the Ji family on the day of the show. One of the officers confirmed that everything said was true, and that it was impossible to argue with it. Cheng Haifeng added that the followers of the 9 masters have been leading a reclusive life for many years. These people hide from society, and it is impossible to just meet them on the street. Chen said that he would settle everything himself because the old ties between the 9 provinces and the Wu family were still intact. He was going to save the face of the 9 masters, and this time only show the world one instigator. After that, the guy looked at Jian Tanhao with a cold gaze, who was frightened and clearly plotting something. Chen said in a low voice that he was going to summon the war spirit, and his words gave off an ancient and formidable power. At that very moment, a demon appeared out of nowhere, approached him, and bowed as if he were his master. Qiang was furious because he couldn't believe that this insignificant demon dared to act so brazenly. Especially considering that their family had been worshipping this creature for 1,000 years, the demon replied that there was no worship, because their brotherhood was exiled, and only Master Xiao Chen gave them a chance to survive. Xiao Chen admitted that he did not want to get his hands dirty and ordered that the enemy's arms and legs be broken so that he would not interfere. Jian Hao was frightened and declared that he would not allow anyone to approach him, because he was the heir of the Jiang family. However, the spirit of war did not obey, came closer, and with an angry expression on his face stared straight at the frightened guy. Xiao Chen then ordered Wu Wenyaliang and Qishan to be brought to him, promising to spare the others in exchange. Everyone present froze in shock and just looked at him silently for a few seconds, not knowing what to do. Hai couldn't stand it any longer and asked why no one was moving. Did they really want to share the same fate? However, no one dared to do anything, because Xiao Chen's strength was incomprehensible. Even the head of the Wu family, who was respected by 9 masters, was defeated with just one precise blow. The officer announced that the police had today captured the traitor Wu Wenyalian and his closest accomplices, and had also liquidated the Jiang family's smuggling den. Thanks to the cooperation of honest citizens, the operation went smoothly and the criminals were neutralized. After finishing the report, he gave the order for everyone to gather, because it was time for them to leave this place. Hai was once again convinced that the young man truly possessed not only the strength, but also the qualities of a true master. Soon, the 2 traitors were defeated and now lay on the ground in front of Xiao Chen, having received what they deserved. Qijian hissed that he would still have time to take revenge and restore his good name. Long Jiwen pointed out that it was not worth taking their lives, and Xiao Chen agreed, giving the order to the war spirit. He ordered the 2 to guard Qing Long's peace for 7 days, emphasizing that if they were to act up or disobey, their arms and legs should be broken, and then act according to the situation. The demon confirmed emotionlessly that he would obey and follow his order exactly. Qijian tried to justify himself by saying that he would improve, and that there was no need to punish him, since they were classmates. Wu Wenyalian admitted that he only did evil because he was in love with Long Jiawen and was pursuing her. Xiao Chen, without turning around, asked Qijian whether he was really responsible for his parents' death. Jian Hao interrupted with a smile and said that it was true. He knew for sure that Qijian was guilty. However, immediately after these words, the spirit of war did not wait for an order and dealt a crushing blow to Tan Hao, knocking him aside and silencing him. Xiao Chen at this point said that he wanted to be alone and think for a while. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Lu Feng noticed that Jian had disappeared somewhere and was not answering his phone. Ji Yuchan chuckled and said that he shouldn't be worried about Zhang, but about her, his cousin, who had once again run away from another blind date. Lu Feng replied that she always behaved boldly, as if she was not afraid of either heaven or earth, but at the same time, for some reason, she was afraid of a simple date. The girl confirmed that this was indeed the case. Among the heirs of the 9 great families, she was the only woman. And for all these young wolves, she was like a piece of meat that everyone wanted to grab onto. She added that she absolutely did not want to marry these unworthy people, and therefore this time she ran away to try to find a normal man. Lu Feng sighed and said that his sister scared him because she had such a picky taste that if she was not satisfied with any of the descendants of the 8 families, then most likely she would never get married at all. But at that very moment, the guy felt a fist fall on his head and stopped short. The lady glared at him and snapped that he shouldn't talk nonsense. The girl noticed that she hadn't visited Uncle Wu for a long time, and finding herself in this city, she decided to definitely stop by to see him. Meanwhile, Xiao Chen, accompanied by his companions, headed in an unknown direction. He felt a subtle aura of a sword in the air, which made him wary. Among the finds were a storage ring and a sword, which he immediately assessed as a worthy find. Although the sword was indeed good, the boy noted with regret that it was damaged. From the looks of it, the storage ring belonged to the patriarch of the Wu family, but Xiao Chen didn't yet know what valuables were hidden inside. Long Jiawen declared with determination that she wanted to kill Wu Wenyaliang herself, thereby avenging her fiancé. Xiao Chen activated the ring, and magical energy instantly began to concentrate around it. He said that if his girlfriend killed him, she would be no different from this scoundrel. Moreover, he said, allowing enemies to suffer longer was far worse than giving them a quick death. Suddenly, a voice came from behind them, assuring them that death would seem like heaven to his enemies compared to what awaited them. The spirit of war said with a grin that these smug guys think they are handsome, but they will soon find out what it is like to lose the ability to produce offspring. Murong Xiaoyu decided that she would definitely learn martial arts from her elder brother so that she could defend herself against such people in the future. At this time, Murong Hai and the other old men came closer. They were shocked by the master's resourcefulness and realized that they needed to act quickly before the others tried to bring their granddaughters together with him. Murong Hai was in a particular hurry, which irritated Cheng Haifeng, who declared that he no longer wished to see him in his dojo. Meanwhile, Xiao was showing Long Jiawen the sword technique and noticed that she was making a mistake. The hero explained that it is necessary to take a deep breath and feel the energy. It should gather in the lumbar region, where it is as if a powerful dragon is sleeping. However, the girl suddenly lost her breath, and her friend asked what happened. Murong Xiaoyu also noticed that her sister's breathing had become chaotic as he approached her. Xiao Chen realized his mistake at this moment, involuntarily shuddered and apologized to the girl. He assured that everything that was happening was necessary solely for her training and he had no other intentions. Murong Xiaoyu suggested that Xiao Chen go with her and her sister to the academy since classes were about to start. She mentioned that there were many street food stalls near the academy, especially the spicy kebabs, and invited him to go for a walk and try it together. Long Jiawen added that Pei Yu and Xiao Xiao also wanted to go, and Xiao Chen promised that he would join them once he finished an important matter. When the young man was left alone, he called upon the fighting spirit and asked what had happened to their opponents. The spirit replied that the enemies were still alive, but their current fate was worse than death. Xiao Chen said that he had prepared a special technique for him that spirit cultivators used. After that, he threw the spirit an ingot on which all the information was written and ordered him to immediately begin training. The spirit acknowledged with admiration that this was an ancient technique lost 1,000 years ago and praised his master for his greatness. He added that he heard about the guy's plans to go shopping and wanted to accompany him, so that he could always be close. In order not to attract attention, the spirit suggested taking the form of a pet, so that he could be nearby and protect the owner both day and night. And a moment later, the demon began to transform, and the sky lit up with bright sparks like a lightning bolt. A few seconds later, the appearance of an ordinary dog appeared in front of Xiao Chen. The guy was stunned. He never expected that the spirit of war would voluntarily choose the form of a dog. He mentally exclaimed that heaven and earth could witness his surprise. It was impossible to imagine such a thing. At this time, Murong Xiaoyu looked at the dog with curiosity and decided that it definitely belonged to her brother. Xiao Chen said that the dog was indeed his, as if someone had given it to him, and now it would be with him. Long Jiawen immediately asked what the dog's name was, and at that moment the spirit was mentally indignant. Deciding that the impudent girl dared to touch the spirit of war itself, Xiao Chen admitted that he has not yet come up with a name and does not know what to call him. Murong Xiaoyu objected that such a wonderful dog could not be left without a name and declared that she would take care of it herself. The spirit noted to itself that the girl was indeed not bad looking, but that did not give her the right to treat the spirit of war like an ordinary animal. However, on the other hand, since it concerns the master, the spirit of war decided that it could endure. After all, it was not so bad. A moment later, Murong Xiaoyu decided to play with the dog, and this game clearly amused her. At this time, Long Jiawen approached Xiao Chen and confessed that she really wanted to learn martial arts, hoping that one day she would gain enough strength to take revenge. The guy explained that Chinese martial arts were originally created by ancestors for hunting and killing wild animals, and therefore they can be considered a type of killing techniques. The practice begins with strengthening the bones, and after achieving results at this level, they move on to the cultivation of qi, which is essentially breathing techniques. Because of the powerful qi of the cultivator, the enemy must master the breathing technique. Otherwise, there will not be enough strength to strike. Having mastered it, people unite the spirit, body, and qi. This is how schools, martial arts, medicine, and witchcraft arose. Xiao Chen explained that it was not about Tao, but about the path to the unity of spirit, body, and energy. Long Jiawen said that she didn't know which kingdom she was in yet. Xiao Chen replied that if one were to use the categories of immortals, then he had most likely already reached the realm of purification. The girl was amazed. If he really reached this level, then it was no wonder that he managed to defeat the patriarch of the Wu family with one move, because he was considered the greatest master. A friend explained that strength is not in the realm, but in mastery, which can be thousands of times greater than the level if one develops the spirit and qi at the same time. When a warrior achieves true mastery, levels cease to matter. In his hands, even an ordinary leaf can turn into a deadly weapon. Long Jiawen noticed the movement of the leaf he released and was amazed by the power hidden within it that was unimaginable. The leaf broke through the stone wall. It was the embodiment of true martial skill. She admitted that she now understands that she shouldn't chase rapid advancement through the kingdoms, but needs to focus on honing the basics and bringing her technique to perfection. In addition, she became increasingly interested in Xiao Chen's origins, and the lady admitted that she didn't even know how she could thank him. Xiao Chen replied that there was no need for gratitude. She still had a long way to go, and he just hoped that she could protect herself in the future. Long Jiawen remembered how her friend had said that gratitude was not important, but at the same time, he had once grabbed her by the waist. At this time, Murong Xiaoyu happily rushed forward, playing with the dog and enjoying the walk. The lady said that if her elder brother didn't have a girlfriend yet, then Long Jiawen would be quite suitable for that role. In response to Xiao Chen's words that children shouldn't think about such nonsense, Murong Xiaoyu countered that there were many boys chasing after her in the academy, and in her opinion, now was the time to think about it. Long Jiawen felt embarrassed and thought to herself that this girl was really taking on too much. At the same time, the two dark shadows watching from the side noticed the leaf crash into the concrete wall and realized that in Xiao Chen's hands, any blade of grass or leaf was capable of killing a person. Cheng Haifeng said that he was going to invite the master to his place for dinner today. There were beautiful girls in their family who had never fallen in love before. Murong Hai immediately flared up, deciding that the old man simply wanted to seduce the master with female beauty, and became seriously angry with him. A lady stood around the corner, watching intently. She was amazed that at such a young age he could already defeat Old Man Wu with such skill. With great difficulty, she managed to pull that very leaf out of the wall. It was so deeply embedded in the concrete. It was quite difficult to do, but she did it. A moment later, the lady thought that if it weren't for the 100 million yuan reward on this young man's head, she would never have killed such a talented guy. The lady admitted to herself that if there was an opportunity, she would definitely take advantage of it. Meanwhile, a large crowd had gathered near the drama college, with many students flocking to one place. The street cuisine delighted the eye with its variety, exquisite appearance, and enticing aromas that filled the air. Some of the students noticed the dog and, finding him very cute, could not resist the urge to pet him. Murong Xiuyu turned to her elder brother, reminding him that such a cute dog definitely needed a name. Xiao Chen admitted that he really hadn't come up with a suitable name, and this question left him a little stumped. Then the girl suggested naming the dog Goudun, and declared that the matter could be considered closed. Xiao Chen and his companions couldn't help but laugh, because the name sounded quite funny when translated. The fighting spirit, hearing this, thought with indignation that a little stupid girl could not call him by such a disdainful name. He had firmly decided that no one would dare call him Goudun. But at that moment he felt someone tickling his stomach, and his thoughts went in a different direction. His gaze slid over the students who were holding him in their arms, and the demon suddenly realized that these girls were indeed very beautiful. Murong Xiaoyu, meanwhile, perceived the dog's behavior as if it clearly liked the suggested name. Xiao Chen, hearing this, said that if so, then he didn't mind. Let her keep the name she wanted. At this moment, Long Jiawen approached him, saying that her fiancé had made a significant contribution to the development of the country, had always remained faithful to her, and now she had decided to also join the army to defend the homeland. Xiao Chen asked anxiously if she had thought it through and if this was a balanced decision. The girl firmly replied that yes, everything was thought out, and she hoped that her friend would not stop her. The young man said that of course he wouldn't. Why interfere with someone else's choice? Murong Xiaoyu intervened and said that if his little brother was such an insensitive idol, then he would definitely never have a girlfriend. At that moment, a sharp voice was heard behind him, angrily noting that they had met again. It was Ji Yu who came with Lu Feng, who wanted to know what happened to Jian Tanhao and where he had disappeared to. Ji Yue, meanwhile, turned her attention to Murong Xiaoyu and her sister, immediately concluding that it was them. The girl confirmed her guess and asked with a smile if she was really a fan of her sister. Ji Yue replied that she was by no means a fan, adding that she was much more interested in the guy nearby. With that, she pointed at Xiao Chen, guessing that he must be a martial artist and practice Chinese wrestling. The dog, watching what was happening, thought that this girl seemed to have completely gone blind. Does the boss look like a simple martial artist if he is actually a real immortal? Murong Xiaoyu, at this moment, noticed that this was simply unthinkable. Could another lady really be in love with her little brother? Ji Yu immediately clarified that her words should not be taken incorrectly. She likes talented people. She decided to invite him to work as a security guard, Murong Xiaoyu froze in place, not believing her own ears. Such a proposal left her in shock. The fighting spirit was also shocked. He clearly heard that this girl was offering his boss to work for her as a security guard, and he considered this to be sheer madness. Murong Xiaoyu couldn't believe that someone would even dare to imagine her brother in such a role. Jiyu continued, stating that she was in need of a young bodyguard to guard the garage, preferably one with Chinese martial arts skills, and this guy had the right qualifications. At that moment, the spirit resolutely rushed forward. His eyes blazing with anger, he was not going to tolerate such impudent words addressed to his master. Lu Feng tried to convince everyone that his sister did not mean to offend anyone, and that the invitation itself was a great honor. Xiao Chen glared at them, realizing that the people from the 9 families had truly become too insolent. At this time, Ji Yu and her brother choked in surprise after hearing something they never expected to hear. Even the spirit of war was wary, because he didn't think that he was dealing with the real descendants of the 9 ancient families. Ji Yu asked where the young man got such information and how he learned such things about them and their family. Xiao Chen said that 9 families inherited the techniques of the masters, and their descendants now stand before him with ancient fighting methods. Ji Yu said that if he was so knowledgeable, he could come to her house and become a junior disciple. The young man declared that she had a good talent, since the lady immediately understood that he was a man with rare strength of spirit, and in a sarcastic tone noted that she was hardly fit for the role of his squire, and suggested that she think about it. Ji Yu replied that the impudence of youth was forgivable, but if he didn't want to be a security guard, let him become a driver. Lu Feng added that the drivers in their family are former special forces soldiers, and each of them, a true god of war. To get such an opportunity is a great rarity, which one can be proud of for the rest of their lives. Xiao Chen noted with a smile that no matter how you look at it, the members of the 9 families tend to exaggerate their own importance. The hero admitted that Ji Yu could become the guardian of his sword, which would give her certain advantages. For example, the young man was ready to reveal to her the secret of the immortal dragon Yuanxi, which he knows perfectly. The girl was amazed because this was the first time she heard that Yuanxi actually had his own ancient dragon. Xiao Chen learned this secret after ascension in his previous life, in the Kunlun Mountains in the heavens, where the human realm and the immortal realm are connected and where the truth hidden from all living beings is kept. If fate allows, he will definitely return there and find out why no saints have been born in this world for 1,000 years. Jiyu thought about it and admitted that the person standing in front of her was a very unusual person with rare wisdom, and asked what his name was. Xiao Chen replied that his name was Xiao Chen Beidou, and he was a great swordmaster born to achieve great things. The girl nodded, promising to remember the name, and then turned to her brother, telling him to stop asking stupid questions. Grabbing his hand, she turned sharply and walked away, leading her relative away from the place of this meeting. Murong Xiaoyu, watching the couple leave, confidently declared that in a year, the whole world would recognize her elder brother, and that impudent girl would be of no use to anyone and would be forgotten like an empty space. Xiao Chen disagreed and guessed that the girl was from the main branch family. The dozen cultivators next to her were probably her guards. This remark of the young man left his girlfriends completely confused. He claimed that she was at the level of laying the foundations. Even the spirit was alarmed, because for her age she looked too young to have reached such a level. Xiao Chen suggested that in ancient times, 9 Wu masters founded the East, and who knows how many more amazing secrets the eastern state built by their efforts hides. Murong Xiaoyu suddenly admitted that she understood everything, but she was also extremely hungry and wanted to have a snack. At this time, Ji Yu was thinking that there was definitely a person with an unusual background standing in front of her, and she needed to keep an eye on him. Lu Feng asked his sister in surprise what exactly was going on, since he couldn't grasp the full depth of her thoughts. The girl said that 9 masters passed on techniques only to the worthy, which gave rise to the provinces, hiding the names of the methods. Now in front of them is the one who named the technique and knows the secret of Yuanxi, while families have studied only the basic instructions of the masters for 1,000 years. Their cultivation methods did not go beyond the prescribed limits, and the true solution was only possible through the secret of the Yuanxi dragon. Her brother said that this sounded ridiculous because, in his opinion, there were no real dragons in this world at all. The lady explained that the dragons did not disappear because of extinction, but because the world was weak. Previously, energy was abundant, and only in such places could they live. She then decided not to continue the argument and suggested that they go and eat some spicy noodles to recover and catch their breath. As the boys moved forward, no one noticed that another mysterious figure was watching them closely from afar. The stranger recognized Ji Yu as the main heir of the family and thought that if she really wanted to invite Xiao Chen as a guard, then she should only increase her interest in him. Gang leader Qing Long reflected on what had happened, noting that the youth had already killed the patriarch and humiliated the Qi and Zhang families. Despite his losses, the families had lost their patrons, and he had not yet even realized how much power he had touched. The lady thought that killing Ji Yu could open the way, but that was too easy, the companion objected. Eliminating her was not as easy as it seemed. She reminded him in a cold tone that this was an agent of the Wu family, and that guy was the culprit behind Qi and Jiang's troubles, and perhaps her friend had been plotting revenge for a long time. Qing Long believed that his identity should be kept secret. Old man Murong was passive, the sisters were indifferent, and power had almost passed to him. The girl decided in response that she would present the master with a special gift, in the form of both Xiao Chen and Ji Yu. Inside the building, the restaurant had a remarkable interior, combining simplicity with elements of oriental sophistication and comfort. Murong Xiaoyu was delighted, because this was the very place where her favorite fried kebabs were sold. At this time, the dog, looking dumbfounded, could not believe that they had actually put a stupid and humiliating collar on his neck. A polite waitress approached them, greeted the guests, and asked which table they would like to sit at. A moment later, her attention was drawn to the dog, and she could not contain her admiration for his appearance and cuteness. The girl added that their establishment has a separate room for animals, where they can rest peacefully. At this moment, Xiao Chen noticed his acquaintance and was slightly surprised with irony that he met her again in this place. Ji Yu guessed that he must be pursuing her, and already regretted refusing the offer, because in the entire East, there was not a single man who would voluntarily refuse such a great honor. Xiao Chen calmly explained that he was not interested in this invitation, and certainly was not following her as she might have thought. Ji Yu said that martial artists are always the same. One already tried to save her for the sake of status. Then he wanted to become a guard in her house. And now here is a guy again, as if by chance and obviously with the same goals. Murong Xiaoyu remembered how her elder sister claimed that the descendants of the 9 families were annoying stalkers. Long Jiwen added that Fei was a very famous person, so it was no wonder that they were constantly stalking her. She also noticed that even at school, the girls were faced with how the heirs of the 9 families created problems for others. Xiao Chen, meanwhile, stated that if this was the case with the current generation of the 9 families, then their era in the East was clearly nearing its end. Lu Feng stopped them, wanting to protect his cousin. She is not arrogant. She was just raised in a different environment. You just have to get to know her better. She is always flattered, and indifference seems threatening. Even the owner of the restaurant does not know who she is, but the entrance was blocked for her comfort. He asked not to judge her harshly, just talk to her, and they will see that she can be nice and open. Lu Feng said that the lady was different from Ji Tianxiang's brother, a cruel man willing to commit crimes for pleasure, especially to play with the feelings of girls. Many beauties from the academy have already become his victims, because Ji Tianxiang is a master at picking any innocent rose. Long Jiawen turned to her friend and started to talk about Ye Xiaohuan, but suddenly stopped mid-sentence as if she had changed her mind. The guy looked at her in surprise and asked again what exactly she wanted to say, but she avoided giving a direct answer. Ji Yu confirmed these words. Her brother had indeed committed many shameful acts, and although she was his relative, she did not approve of such behavior in her heart. Murong Xiaoyu pointed out that she had heard such rumors before, but had dismissed them as gossip, and was now shocked that it was true, and declared that she intended to master martial arts as soon as possible to show such people her place. Xiao Chen, meanwhile, suggested that everyone calm down and just have lunch together, since they had gathered as one group. The young man noticed that there was a hidden flaw in Yuanqi's technique. It was harmless at first, but dangerous later. The hero could help if Ji Yu agreed. Ji Yu asked in amazement how he knew such secret knowledge about their clan's technique, since it was a closely guarded secret. The young man said that he had distant roots in 9 families. 5,000 years ago, 9 ancestors came from the world of immortals and met the masters. These masters founded the 9 families, but since then the energy of heaven and earth has weakened before the cultivators flew. But now the 9 ancestors interfere. The young man thought that the 9 families probably knew about this terrible secret, and he intended to find out why they were hiding it. Ji Yak wondered if the mysterious young man knew such deep secrets of their family, then who was he really? At this moment, Murong Xiaoyu stepped between them, deciding to divert attention to herself and interrupt their tense conversation. She noticed that the boys were looking at each other too closely, wondering if they had accidentally fallen in love. Chen was a little embarrassed and replied that of course not, although he noted to himself that she was not talented enough for him to be attracted to her. At this time, Long Jiawen watched what was happening with a slight sadness, and a quiet, uninvited melancholy could be read in her gaze. Meanwhile, Goudun was extremely outraged that he was placed in the animal room, because he was a spirit, not a simple dog. However, his indignation was interrupted by an unexpected moment. Something in front of him instantly attracted his attention and distracted him from his thoughts. It was an ordinary-looking but incredibly beautiful dog, and Goudun could not understand what was special about it. He convinced himself that a spirit could not be carried away by a dog, but deep down he began to feel something completely different. A moment later, the dog knew for sure that he was hopelessly in love, and there was no point in arguing with this feeling. The waitress delighted the dog with a treat, and it seemed that he really liked it there. He felt real happiness. At this time, events were unfolding at the villa of the governor of Jiangzhou, where something much more tense was happening. One of the maids brought a tray with a lot of fresh fruit, bowing before the young master as a sign of respect. But the idol was interrupted by Qing Long, who abruptly announced that Mr. Basis wanted to see those same three scum. The heir of the 9 families, Xiang, lazily picked up the fruit and casually looked at it, radiating his usual arrogance. Qijan and the other two quickly knelt before him, as if before a deity. Full of reverent fear, the gentleman merely gritted his teeth, looking at them with disgust. And with this simple gesture made it clear how furious he was. The guy loudly declared that he had spent a lot of money to save them and even took out 3 bloody black jade pills from the treasury. These pills were created by an ancient alchemist hundreds of years ago, and now that the alchemists have disappeared, they were considered truly priceless. Jian Hao, trembling with fear, assured that he was immensely grateful to the master. He was ready to become even a cow or a footstool for him. The Wu and Qi families were willing to do anything to atone for their guilt before the young master and avoid further consequences. Qing Long sarcastically remarked that their entire fortune barely amounted to several billion. For the gentleman, this was like a pair of cheap boots. Jian Hao said, with a trembling voice, that if the master wished, he was willing to become his slave without the slightest hesitation. Xiang only sneered with disdain, while Qing Long couldn't help but burst into loud and wild laughter, deafening everyone. He added that in order to become a master's slave, one must at least reach the level of a martial arts master. Otherwise, there is no point in thinking about it. Moreover, according to him, even the appearance and posture of slaves should be at the level of models, and these 3 barely reach the level of dogs. These words were like a slap in the face. Jian Hao clenched his teeth in impotent rage, but did not dare to utter a word. Tiansong noted with pleasure how much he enjoyed looking at the faces of these 3, distorted with humiliation. He smugly said that even if someone does not want to serve him now, sooner or later they will still crawl at his feet. Jian Hao looked up, and there was no longer any dignity left in his eyes, only fear, loyalty, and hopelessness. Wu Wenyalian bowed before Ji Tianxiang and asked him to spare his life out of respect for the memory of his late grandfather. The young master graciously agreed, adding that it was only because of the patriarch that he was ready to accept him as one of his slaves. Wu Wenyalian bowed deeply and promised that he would be eternally grateful for such an honor and would not forget this kindness. Meanwhile, the other 2 were given the special duty of looking after Ji Tianxiang's dog until further notice. It was humiliating. The heir of the Zhang family, one of the respected people of the city, was now becoming the master's dog handler. Qing Long noticed that the young master's slaves had great power, authority, and status in society. These people carry out their duties with pride, because becoming a servant of Ji Tianxiang is an honor that thousands dream of. The current ruler of Jiangzhou is seriously ill, which means that a new leader will be elected soon. Perhaps it will be the master himself, or Ji Yu's husband. Therefore, those who have the opportunity to become his slaves should consider it incredible luck and cherish the moment. All the while, the 3 disgraced men nodded silently, unable to utter a single word from shock and shame. Qing Long brought Ji Tianxiang's dog and warned that from now on, she was their mistress, and all her whims had to be fulfilled, because now she had the same power over them as the owner. Otherwise, they will inevitably meet their end. The master's methods are much more merciless than those of the legendary spirit of war. Wu Wenyalian looked at the others sullenly and said that if he were in their place, he would hurry up. This was still a generous chance. After saying these words, he personally approached Ji Tianxiang, knelt down, and swore to be his loyal slave. The young master grinned and ordered him to crawl like a dog on all fours, and he obeyed without objection. Jian Tanhao tried to use his acquaintance with Ji Yu and Liu Feng, begging to be taken as a personal servant. But Qing Long looked at him with irritation, his eyes flashing with anger. This clearly caused displeasure. Ji Tianxiang disdainfully remarked that that woman Ji Yu had long since ceased to be his sister, and ordered his dog to be brought. Jian Tanhao trembled in fear as he realized that his attempt to suck up had turned into a disaster. The very next second his figure was defeated, he lay on the ground, completely depressed. Ji Tianxiang, as if nothing had happened, lazily wiped his palm and asked Qing Long about the current situation. He reported that their gang already controlled Jiangzhou and would soon find a school for Murong Xiaoyu. He also added that the girl's father would soon be completely at their disposal, as well as all his property. Yi Tianxiang nodded approvingly, noting that almost half of the city was already in his hands, which brought him closer to victory. The guy added that Murong Hai was much more useful than the guy from the Wu family, but admitted that there was only one serious competitor left, Xiao Chen, about whom there were strange rumors. Qing Long confirmed that this guy was much stronger than an ordinary master, and it seemed like he came from the mysterious ancient temple. In response, Ji Tianxiang said that no temple could compare to the greatness of the 9 families, ordered them to act faster, and emphasized that the old man's health was deteriorating, and therefore, it was necessary to complete all preparations as soon as possible. He also ordered to convey to a certain woman killer that Xiao Chen was of interest to him. Perhaps it was worth making him a slave. Meanwhile, far from these conversations, the youth continued to relax and have fun in a luxurious nightclub. Murong Xiaoyu was delighted to note that the taste of the dish was simply amazing. Spicy, hot, and incredibly piquant. Ji Yu pointed out that they also had kebabs, but the chef was giving in, and then asked Xiao Chen how he knew about the flaw in Yuanqi's technique. The young hero said that he had seen Ji Yu's family and would give her advice later, but he decided that he would not reveal the entire truth about those who had ascended to the immortal world. Murong Xiaoyu cheerfully noted that her older brother was very strong and reminded Ji Yu that her friend was looking for a suitable groom. The lady added that maybe they would look good together, but he is too cool to be with just one girl. The boys were visibly embarrassed at this. Ji Yu blushed, and Xiao Chen felt a slight sweat break out on him. A moment later, Ji Yu changed the subject, reminded her about Jian Tanhao, who had disappeared after being punished, and wondered if she could fall in love with Xiao Chen, because he was not as simple as he seemed at first glance. In fact, her uncle Wu was the head of the security detail in charge of the Ji family's eldest brother's safety. He could be considered a pawn of the 9 houses. The Wu family ran shady businesses and helped them with their dirty deeds. Xiao Chen noticed that the 3 guys didn't just leave, they went missing. And the reason was Ji Tianxiang's actions. Ji Yu admitted that her brother was extremely dangerous. He had always been cruel and prone to mental torture since childhood. In response, the young hero said that, on the contrary, he simply likes to kill. His sword teaches him to go forward with his head held high. All friends unanimously confirmed that Ji Tianxiang is indeed dangerous and that he has victims of his cruelty. Xiao Chen remained calm and wondered why the 9 families still tolerated such a monster within their ranks. Ji Yu said that families have ruled for 5,000 years despite the change of power. Her brother is dangerous, but her future husband is even worse. Such is the fate of the Golden Elite. The boy said he was not surprised. One of the lords, dying in rage because of the strife, cursed his family and wished that no more life would be born in this house. Murong Xiaoyu sympathized with her friend, wondering if she couldn't choose her own life partner. Ji Yu admitted that in their world, power, connections, and money are important, not love. She doesn't want anyone to decide for her. But there are almost no worthy people. At this point, Lu Feng interrupted their conversation and suggested replacing the wine with juice to enjoy the meal. The girls readily supported his idea. Indeed, there was no point in talking about gloomy things during such an evening. Ji Yu raised her glass of juice with a smile and made a toast. She drank to them, and this warm moment. Suddenly, Xiao Chen slammed the table hard and harshly demanded that no one drink the juice that was served to them. The young man said that the drink was poisoned, and apparently, among them was the killer who came for Ji Yu. The girl stood frozen in a daze, unable to utter a word, her face frozen in anxiety and tension. At this moment, 2 other ladies approached them, praised the juice, and thanked Xiao Chen for the treat. Murong Xiaoyu understood what was going on. Her brother hadn't ordered anything, and they had clearly been misled. Xiao Xiao assured that the waitress at the entrance handed them the juice. Everything looked like a normal reception for guests. For a few moments, everyone looked at the girls in silence, and then they suddenly began to fall rapidly. Chen barely managed to catch them, and immediately realized that the mysterious enemy had come specifically for him and his friends. The young man immediately gave the order for no one to move. Now it became clear that the poison was not only in the drinks. A complex poisonous formula was used, which came from ancient times and was very dangerous. All over the hall, there were already people lying motionless, struck down by the poison hidden in ordinary food and drinks. After the barbecue, the visitors lost consciousness, and now chaos reigned in the club. Everyone who was in the room collapsed unconscious. At that moment, a mysterious lady entered the room and said that she was surprised that someone was able to recognize her poison. She noted with a smile that Chen was quite knowledgeable about poisons, but he had already drunk it, so why was he standing and not falling over? Murong Xiaoyu asked with difficulty. When did she manage to poison everyone in such a short time? Long Jiawen felt the poison starting to take effect, her body weakening, and her temples were pounding with pain. Lu Feng turned to his sister with concern, asking if she was okay and if she felt unwell. Ji Yu said with pain that she too had become a victim, and did not believe that she had been poisoned too. Chen noticed that he immediately suspected something was wrong. The overly pungent smell of the food seemed strange as soon as they entered. He recalled that Ji Yu had spoken about the establishment's popularity, but there were only frontmen inside. All the visitors in the hall, with the exception of them, turned out to be accomplices. The trap was carefully thought out. After the revelation, the girl lying on the floor suddenly raised her head and stared at the hero in surprise. One of the visitors remarked that Chen was truly extraordinary, since he was able to defeat Old Man Wu, who was considered the #1 master, and an ordinary rogue would never be able to defeat him in battle. It turns out that there are people from the 9 families everywhere here. This is not just a trap. Everything is thought out and organized at the highest level. Goudun, sensing something was wrong, rushed forward. He realized that the woman had distracted him with the help of the dog and was planning something evil. The dog swore to Chen to destroy the pathetic murderers. They are unworthy of the title of warriors and will not be able to catch someone who is much stronger than them. The woman chuckled. This cute dog, the spirit of war, even though he was 1,000 years old, for her, he was still a naive and stupid puppy. Suddenly the dog felt dizzy. Perhaps he had also been poisoned, lost his bearings, fell to the ground and lost consciousness. Chen noticed that the poisons of the masters were almost impossible to overcome. Even the immortals would flee from them. Ji Yu sharply said that she didn't care. Let these people choose to face death. One of the enemy's accomplices laughed, promising the girl happy moments before death. In vain did she decide to object. At this moment, Tang Xuan turned her head, her bright blue eyes flashing with a cold light, piercing the boy. She strictly stated that no one should dare to interrupt her during the conversation. This was strictly forbidden. Before his ally could object, his face twisted and he felt a choking force grip his throat. A moment later, the guy collapsed to the floor, completely exhausted and unable to even understand where he was. One of the other fighters was outraged. Doing this to your own people is a gross mistake. It undermines the team. Tang Xuan replied that he was greatly mistaken about her character and looked at him with fury, her eyes blazing. At that very moment, the daring daredevil tried to utter a word, but felt a crushing pain and was unable to continue. Murong Xiaoyu realized with horror, this woman was truly insane to even kill her own people. Long Jiawen anxiously noticed that she was too weak. She could only rely on Chen and not give up. The lady clearly understood that until she learned to defend herself, she would not survive. One of the women harshly condemned Tang Xuan. She was risking everything, and if the task failed, who would answer to the master? Everything would not go unpunished. Chen intervened, coldly stating that there would be no excuses. He had been soft for too long and hated those who forced their problems on him. The best way to get rid of problems is to eliminate their cause, and it seems time to remind everyone present of this. At this moment, the enemy felt a crushing pressure. Tang Xuan was shocked. She never expected that Chen was capable of such a terrifying display of strength. Meanwhile, the young man continued calmly that any troubles must be torn out by the roots, leaving no trace. One of the fighters rushed forward with a cry, hoping to prove that he was not inferior, but his determination was doomed. Chen calmly commented that such insolence was only possible for those who were tired of living and had lost the instinct for self-preservation. With the next movement, he swung his sword, and one blow was enough. The enemy fell unconscious. The others immediately grabbed their weapons, calling on themselves to remain calm. Chen's head was worth 100 million. The young man mockingly said that they seemed to have decided to defeat him with numbers, but maybe they would still try to go out one by one. The hero pushed off the ground with determination, and his movements were swift, full of power and inner strength. A few moments later, he instantly destroyed one of the enemies with one swing of his sword, not giving him a chance to defend himself. The next opponent also tried to grab him, but to no avail. The young man instantly dealt with him too. After this, only a few girls remained, whom the hero, without hesitation, also destroyed, making no exceptions. Tang Xuan noted with admiration that his technique was truly an ancient sword art that had long been lost in the modern era, and now she was increasingly interested in its origins. Gien recalled that the attackers belonged to the Tang family, one of the 9 families of the East, and expressed outrage that someone from that family dared to attack her, as such an act would be severely punished. Tang Xuan responded with disbelief, asking what the consequences might be, since she herself was the heir to one of the 9 families and did not need a reason to destroy anyone. Ji asked doubtfully if she was really so confident in her ability to complete the task. At this time, Murong Xiaoyu burst into tears, overcome with fear. The witch in front of her was clearly capable of murder, and the girl had not yet had time to really live, had never fallen in love, and would her life really end so early? Lu Feng looked completely taken aback. His eyes were empty as he silently stared ahead. Long Jiawen anxiously felt that her strength was fading with each passing second, as if poison was gradually taking over her body. Xiaochen tried to calm the others down, stating that if Tang Xuan really wanted to kill them, she would have done so long ago, and her true goal was to observe and find out why the poison did not work on him. Everyone was surprised by this hypothesis, their eyes filled with confusion and interest. Even Ji Yu admitted the thought that such a version might be true. Long Jiawen was also surprised, her eyes reflecting genuine amazement. Xiaochen reported that the Tang family of Sichuan is the most mysterious in the East, famous for its use of poison and outstanding cultivation. He added that the Tang family is ruled by women who undergo dangerous trials in their youth to become stronger, and Tang Xuan is probably one of them. The lady acknowledged Xiaochen's strength and insight, but according to family customs, she couldn't just let them go even if she wanted to. Ji Yu suddenly had a hunch that Tang Xuan might have been sent by Ji Tianxiang to eliminate his own sister. Murong Xiaoyu said sadly. At this moment, she truly felt sorry for Ji Yu. How could Ji Tianxiang do such a cruel thing? Was it all about wanting to take over the position of the head of the family? Xiaochen said that he and his brother grew up as if in a greenhouse. But in the struggle for power, only the strongest will survive. The head of the family saw this as a test and watched with interest. He added that Ji Tianxiang, wanting to become the leader, would try to eliminate his sister, and Tang Xuan could gain mercy by revealing the secrets of the poisons. Tang Xuan replied with a thoughtful expression. Xiaochen is a very interesting person, and in her opinion, he should be taken to Sichuan, because a man with such a character will be very popular there. Murong Xiaoyu flushed with indignation and exclaimed, "Was Tang Xuan really going to take away their brother just like that? She must have gone crazy." At this moment, the spirit of war became noticeably angry, and heat thickened around him like a real fire. Xiaochen quickly calmed his friend down, explaining that Tang Xuan was just stalling for time, hoping to poison him, but she wouldn't have the slightest chance. The next moment, Tang Xuan swiftly rose into the air, showing clear determination to engage in battle. However, Xiaochen did not lose his composure and prepared his weapon to strike at the right moment. Tang Xuan approached him relentlessly, her gaze filled with unwavering determination, and in her hands the lady tightly clutched a sharp and elegant dagger. Xiaochen noted with cold disdain that it turned out that she knew how to handle a blade, and this was really getting interesting. The next moment, Tang Xuan launched a lightning-fast, crushing blow, but Xiaochen managed to block it. He looked forward angrily, a menacing gleam in his eyes. The boy then launched a counterattack, which Tang Xuan barely managed to dodge, only narrowly avoiding injury. The next moment, the lady abruptly moved to the side, dodging the stream of magical sparks that almost hit her. Xiaochen noted out loud that he was probably not mistaken. This was indeed the saint of the Tang family. However, the hero added that this was the first time he saw the saint of the Tang family in the form of a blonde, and he found this very curious. Tang Xuan asked with a smile whether he really considered her to be the saint of the Tang family, and invited him to come closer to find out for sure. After that, the lady coldly ordered her men to kill everyone else, leaving only Xiaochen alive. The young hero mentally addressed the spirit of war, asking it to use its power to temporarily slow the poison's effect in its body while the dog dealt with the enemies. The spirit of war rushed forward eagerly, confident that his fearsome appearance would be enough to destroy these pathetic mortals. However, the next moment, Goudun stopped short, the ancient poison of the Tang family blocking his ability to transform. At that moment, everyone noticed how a crowd of opponents with weapons at the ready was rapidly approaching them. Jiyu looked ahead with determination, ready to destroy anyone who dared to come close. One of the bandits recognized her and said with a grin that this beauty with skin like jade had not yet known men. But today, they would fix that. He rushed towards Jiyu with a greedy gaze, anticipating an easy victory. In response, the lady remarked with cold disdain that he was apparently simply bored with life. The next moment, the enemy received a crushing slap that sent him flying. Jiyu, without a hint of hesitation, struck out with full force, showing no mercy at all. The second opponent mockingly declared that it was all quite good, and suggested that the lady might wish to try his skill. But the next moment he received a crushing blow, Chen intervened without hesitation. The guy immediately turned to his companion and asked how she was feeling, and if everything was okay. The girl decisively took off her top, noting that she felt fine overall, but after the contraction she felt hot. Despite the weakness caused by the poison, the lady declared that it was quite sufficient to deal with such non-entities. Tang Xuan angrily remarked that the Tang family's ancient poison should not be underestimated. Its power was truly terrifying. Chen closely watched her every move and barely managed to dodge another attack. Suddenly, Tang Xuan forcefully pushed the stool away, clearly intending to go on the offensive. However, the guy parried her maneuver in time and immediately heard a warning. When using spiritual power, the poison begins to intensify, causing the blood to boil and causing unbearable heat. Murong Xiaoyu noted that the description sounded too much like an aphrodisiac, and Long Jiawen added that ancient sources mentioned its use for abducting women. Murong Xiaoyu burst into tears, desperately repeating that she hadn't even had time to make a gay friend. She was still so young and had never been in a relationship. At this moment, Goudun suddenly intervened in the fight, promising that he would protect them all, and there was nothing to worry about. However, one of the fighters, approaching him, dismissively ordered the stupid dog to get out of the way. Goudun couldn't believe that someone dared to look down on him. Something like that shouldn't go unpunished. The next second, the demon dog rushed forward, grabbed the impudent man by the leg and sank his fangs in with all his might. The opponent groaned loudly in pain. This grip was unbearable and knocked him off his feet. Goudun scornfully remarked that anyone who dared to look down on a dog should taste the strength of his paw. With these words, he threw the enemy aside with wild fury, like a rag doll. The unfortunate man fell, desperately trying to feel something with his hands, but to no avail. His body did not obey. The girls, meanwhile, were shocked and outraged because they saw something disgusting. One of the bandits leaned over the ladies and said with a nasty grin that the baby was clearly on fire and he could take care of her. However, not a minute had passed before each of the opponents received what they deserved. Goudun knew no mercy and attacked with fury. The spirit of war mentally addressed his boss, reminding him that this was not good. The girls were in danger, and he was not able to come to everyone's aid at once. At this time, Tang Xuan, still aiming to strike Chen, chided him for being distracted during the fight. The lady said with irritation that she was clearly being underestimated here, but that soon everyone would understand who they were dealing with. The next strike was sharp and swift. Chen barely had time to block it to defend himself. The hero realized that he could no longer afford to waste time. Everything had to be decided quickly. With this thought in mind, he quickly went on the offensive, forcing Tang Xuan to abruptly jump to the side. The young man rose into the air, his eyes flashing with a cold, dangerous light, ready to finish the fight. Tang Xuan, despite this, carefully watched his every move, her gaze still showing the determination to see the fight through to the end. The girl said coldly that although he claimed that he was not afraid of poison, his body was giving him away, since he could no longer use spiritual power. At this moment, Chen resolutely threw his sword forward, leaving behind a whirlwind of power. The boy noticed that it was time to use the sword technique he had once passed on to Long Jiawen. The girl instantly responded to the call, her gaze falling on the sword flying towards her. The lady gripped the handle tightly, mentally promising herself not to let Chen down under any circumstances. The bald opponent laughed mockingly, not hiding his surprise that a little cultivator appeared in front of him. However, he immediately invited her to carefully examine her brother's technique, claiming that the lady would be delighted. Long Jiawen gathered all her determination and stepped forward, charging straight at her opponent. The next second, there was a powerful collision, accompanied by a wave of spiritual energy. The enemy froze. He could not believe that such a thing was even possible. His face was distorted with horror. Goudun informed his boss that everything was now under control and no one would dare to even approach the girls. Tanguan noticed that even in the heat of battle, he did not forget about his beloved. But in her opinion, he should take a closer look at the women around him. Chen sharply rebuked her, telling her not to talk nonsense, since Long Jiawen was his cousin's fiancé. However, Tanguan only chuckled and said that in that case she was even more right, because men are always attracted to the unattainable. A bright light flashed in Chen's eyes. He was at his limit, and a wave of rage engulfed him. A lightning attack shot out from his hand and struck Tanguan, causing the girl to cry out in pain. The lady couldn't understand how he was able to reach such speed because this blow had incredible power. Chen coldly said that she had completely ruined his mood, and the guy did not intend to waste another minute on her. With these words, the hero pushed off the ground with a powerful jerk, and streams of magical energy began to swirl around him. Tanguan raised her gaze with difficulty and saw that the technique the youth had just used was so powerful that her spirit couldn't help but tremble. Chen was now striking one after another, and every move he made was precise, powerful, and honed to the limit. Tanguan stood frozen in a daze, unable to do anything, as her body simply wouldn't obey and the attacks were too fast. A moment later, there was a dull explosion and thick smoke began to settle around her, obscuring part of the battlefield. The young lady suddenly said that she couldn't wait for Chen to become part of the Tang family. She also added that her figure is in no way inferior to that of the girl he now looks at so often. Murong Xiaoyu flushed with anger, noticing that this person clearly knew how to get to the heart of men's perceptions and say only what hurt the most. At this moment, Goudun, feeling awkward, stole a glance at the girls. However, a moment later, both he and Murong Xiaoyu received an unexpected slap, someone clearly trying to bring them to their senses. Long Jiawen angrily said that if her friend said another word like that, she would risk losing her dear head. Murong Xiaoyu burst into tears, insisting that what she had said was the pure truth. And Tanguan said that it seemed that she would not be able to deprive Chen of his powers today. But the situation was curious. Ji Yu at this moment addressed her with a threat, noting that after attacking one of the heirs of the 9 families, Tanguan would no longer be able to simply escape. But the lady explained that she used an ancient poison, once considered one of the most dangerous. It was capable of seducing even an immortal. The lady added that Chen would hardly be able to cope with its consequences. But if he wanted, he could always find her. She would be glad to accept him as her betrothed. After these words, Tanguan turned to her group and ordered them to retreat. The battle was over. Goudun turned to Chen in amazement, not believing that they would really just get away with it. Chen confirmed that the poison was already working, the temperature was rising, the blood was boiling, the organs were overheating, and only a close energy exchange could stop the process. In response to this, Goudun sighed with a resigned look, deciding that there was probably no antidote for it. Chen turned to Murong Xiaoyu and told her to contact her father immediately. They needed to leave this place as soon as possible. A short time later, the entire group arrived at the hotel, where the only way to contain the poison was to place them in a freezer. The girls followed the instructions and entered the room with ice. Their bodies were literally burning from the inside, and there was simply no other way to alleviate the condition. Goudun was shivering from the cold, but he did not take his eyes off what was happening and continued to watch vigilantly. Lu Feng noted with amazement that the temperature in the room dropped below -10 degrees, but the bodies of the victims still did not cool down, but on the contrary, continued to evaporate heat. Chen turned to him and said that it seemed that Lu Feng had managed to neutralize the poison, so he could leave the freezer. He was surprised and asked if Chen really intended to handle the poison purification for all the girls on his own. Murong Xiaoyu looked lost, as she had never had an intimate relationship in her life, and didn't know how to take it all. However, the young man hastened to reassure her, saying that there was no need to misunderstand everything. He was going to use the technique of circulating life energy to carry out detoxification. The young man noted that the method was extremely dangerous and required great precision, so he was personally ready to take the risks and ordered them to hold hands. This is necessary to close the energy circle required to begin the process. Chen said that he was starting the purification and asked Goudun to leave the room and guard the entrance so that no one would disturb them. The dog reluctantly obeyed, grumbling that his boss was a real villain because he himself needed help no less. Lu Feng suggested that it would be better for Goudun to go with him. That would be more correct. With these words, the guy moved towards the exit and took the dog with him. He was ready for any development of events. Jiyu noticed that the poison had a much weaker effect on men, and it was as if the blood in her body was boiling, ready to explode. Peiyu and Xiao Xiao also experienced something similar, and this burning feeling inside was extremely painful and disturbing. Xiao Chen urged everyone to remain calm, promising to use spiritual power to ease their situation. Long Jiewen admitted with fear that she had almost completely lost control of her own body and mind. Something similar happened to Ji Yu. The heat in her blood paralyzed her thinking, turning her consciousness into an uncontrollable stream. Peiyu and Xiao Xiao could no longer control themselves at all, as if their bodies had stopped listening to them and obeying their will. Xiao Chen noticed with horror that all this was an extremely alarming symptom, and he himself was a little confused. Murong Xiaoyu looked at him with concern. Her voice was reserved, but her eyes were filled with genuine worry. The girl admitted with difficulty that she felt her body literally burning from the inside from the growing tension. The lady then extended her hands towards Xiao Chen, as if instinctively seeking a source of relief from him. At that moment, the young man realized with amazement that all the girls next to him had surrounded him in a tight ring. The hero took a step back in panic and asked them to pull themselves together and not give in to the strange state. However, it was too late. The girls literally swarmed over him, unable to resist the heat in their blood. Seeing that persuasion was not helping, the young man pushed himself off the floor to escape from this chaos. He jumped forward and dodged, deciding to temporarily escape the dangerous effects of the ancient poison. Inwardly, the boy admitted that the Tang family's poison was indeed strong, but he knew several ways to neutralize it. With these thoughts, the young man concentrated his spiritual power, and a magical beam burst out from his fingers. After asking the ladies for forgiveness, he directed this beam at Ji Yu, who immediately froze in a daze. The same magical effect was felt by the other girls. It calmed the mind and lowered the body temperature. About 5 hours passed before Xiao Chen walked forward with a victorious expression and headed towards the door. He looked outside and saw Lu Feng, who was eagerly awaiting news and worried about his cousin's condition. If the girl had not been able to cope with the consequences of the poison, it could have turned into a real disaster for him. Goudun laughed loudly. After all, with Boss by his side, Lu Feng had nothing to worry about. Everything would be fine. Lu Feng turned around in surprise. He was amazed that the dog could talk. It was completely unexpected, but he calmly replied that he was the spirit of war, and speech for him was not something unusual, but a natural ability. At this moment, Xiao Chen turned to his friend and asked where Xiang lived. He wanted to know the exact address. The young man added that he would not attack first until he touched him, but if that happened, there would be no mercy. However, Murongjung warned him, reminding him not to act rashly and challenge the 9 houses. Xiao Chen replied that he was completely prepared to go to the end. He used to spare his enemies, but now everything has changed. Meanwhile, in Dai Tianqiang's estate, there was a tense but lively atmosphere as preparations were underway for a new attack. Tang Xuan bandaged the wounds and thought, "This guy is really interesting. Maybe he is even dangerous." Qing Long coldly declared that the mission had failed. Xiao Chen was alive, and Tang Xuan had made a mess of attacking Ji Yu, reminding him that she, the heiress of 9 houses, could not be quarreled with. The girl only grinned, explaining that the poison she used was a powerful aphrodisiac, beloved by the silkworms of her kind, and that the enemies would become their food. At the same time, the lady showed her hand, on which sat a dangerous and shiny silkworm with golden wings. Very soon she will release the insect into the wild, and it will feast to its heart's content. Qing Long frowned. These creatures were considered to be some of the most poisonous in the world, and he hoped that Tang would not let him down. The gang leader reminded that the master was not only interested in Xiao Chen, but also in the Holy Tang family, so she could not make any mistakes. At that moment, the silkworm soared into the air, its wings glowing, heralding the imminent beginning of another deadly scene. Tang Xuan asked if Xiang really wanted to drag a saint with a heavenly body into his harem, and if he could withstand her strength. Qing Long thought with alarm that the celestial body was not just a gift, but according to military information, it was one of the most dangerous bodies. He then turned to the guard and said that he was instructed to keep an eye on this crazy girl so that she wouldn't suddenly run away and do something else. The guard immediately nodded and vowed to do whatever he was ordered to do without hesitation. Tang Xuan looked at him with disdain. Was she really the one who was considered crazy? The man, frightened, began to hastily justify himself, saying that he hadn't said anything like that and that wasn't what he had meant at all. But the lady coldly stated that what was in front of her now was Silkworm Jin's first snack for the evening. Despite his desperate pleas for mercy, The next moment, the golden silkworm completely enveloped his body. A few seconds later, it was all over. The unfortunate man collapsed lifelessly at her feet. Tang Xuan quietly said that Gien would definitely eat all the women around Xiao Chen without exception. Then the lady grinned predatorily and added that Xiao Chen himself could be left to her. And that would even be interesting. Meanwhile, in the courtyard of the villa, the bright sun was shining, reflecting on the surface of a small artificial lake. Yi Tiankong noted that the heir to the head of Jiangzhou Bank had been taking good care of his dog for several months now. The young man nodded respectfully but did not dare to look up at his master, holding his breath. Ji Tianxiang glanced coldly at his slaves, then admitted that this servant deserved more for his diligence. The guy said that in the future he would allow him to inherit his father's place and even give him the role of one of his dog handlers. The young man bowed low and thanked from the bottom of his heart. And then he reverently promised that he would never forget the high honor shown to him. Ji Tianxiang casually said that even the governor of Jiangzhou was just a loyal dog of their family. Then his voice turned icy, and the guy turned to the other people and said that some of them didn't seem to want to become his dogs. Jian Tanhao confessed with repentance that he had been greatly mistaken before, and now begged for mercy and forgiveness. Ji Tianxiang angrily declared that he would not give anyone a second chance. These two were not even worthy of being called his dogs. After these words, the villain contemptuously stepped on one of them, as if on a miserable insect. Then he ordered that these worthless people should immediately get out of his sight and not dare to come near him again. Qijian and Jian Tanhao tearfully begged him not to drive him away, but their pleas went unanswered, and a moment later, their bodies were thrown back by a sharp blow, and they, stunned, flew back several meters. At this moment, Xiao Chen was secretly watching from the rooftop, carefully assessing what was happening below. The guy was convinced that Ji Tianxiang was indeed perverted. Just as Ji Yu said earlier, everything turned out to be true. Goudun said that he could sense dozens of powerful auras. There were plenty of dangerous high-level masters here. Xiao Chen noticed that almost all of his enemies, Wu Wenyalian, Jian Tanhao, and even Qi Zhan, had gathered in this place. The hero understood that he could have destroyed them long ago, but before he was too soft, now he was not going to spare them. Goudun reminded them that they were in the territory of the 9 families, and the Ji family had held power for many years. The young man replied that they could rule, but it would be better for them not to have people like Ji Tianxiang around. The dog emphasized that he had mastered many techniques and was now able to easily deal with the so-called masters. At this moment, several opponents rushed forward with determination, attacking Xiao Chen with fury in their eyes. One of them demanded to explain who he was and how he dared to enter the territory without permission. But Xiao Chen ignored the question, and then the guy threatened. Being in the Ji family's mansion is strictly prohibited. Hearing this, Ji Tianxiang became wary and realized that someone brazen had dared to disturb the peace of his home. A sudden realization dawned on him. There was no mistake. This was indeed that same Xiao Chen. For a few seconds, the boy stood motionless, not taking his eyes off the enemy who embodied his hidden fear. Ji Tianxiang suddenly burst into wild laughter, absolutely confident in his own invincibility and superiority. He couldn't believe that Xiao Chen dared to come here. He was probably looking for trouble and found it. Without haste, the villain reached for a strawberry from the tray and lazily ordered his servants to catch the impudent youth. He mentally promised that he would personally re-educate this impudent fellow and make him crawl at his feet. The guards immediately grabbed their weapons, ready to carry out their master's orders without hesitation. Meanwhile, Xiao Chen appeared before him in all his glory and suggested that he commit suicide before the battle began. Yi Tianxiang, who had never met anyone with more self-importance than him, ordered that the guy be captured alive. He promised a reward of 100 million to anyone who could complete this task and capture Xiao Chen. But at that moment, Xiao Chen rushed forward, and a crowd of guards rushed towards him, intending to stop him. With one swift blow, he knocked out the first one who dared to approach, and demonstrated his serious attitude. The other fighters were fired by the thirst for profit. 100 million was too tempting a reward to refuse. Ji Tianxiang declared that this was the true power of money and authority, and suggested that Xiao Chen surrender right now. Otherwise, a reward would be placed on the heads of his relatives and friends. Qijian, with a greedy glint in his eyes, rushed forward, hoping to personally catch the impudent youth. But Xiao Chen just then crushed another enemy as soon as he tried to approach him. Goudun said that the boss was too strong. There was no point in wasting time or effort on these mongrels. After this, the dog jumped up and loudly offered to show what he was capable of. The spirit laughed heartily and asked his first victim what it was like to taste his attack. A moment later, the next warrior was already on the ground, unable to rise from the blow. There were already dozens of fallen bodies lying around Xiao Chen. The air was thick with dust and the smell of battle. One of the fighters, shocked by what was happening, respectfully asked the name of the young man who had fought so fiercely. Xiao Chen turned around and said his name with disdain, glancing at the questioner. The stranger advised not to get involved in a conflict with people from the Nine Houses. These opponents are extremely dangerous. But the next moment, Xiao Chen grabbed the fighter by the neck and coldly said that he had already heard too many empty words today. Then he added that the best way to get out of a difficult situation is to get rid of its source. Xiang said that this master, a strange man, pushed him off a cliff 7 years ago, but he apparently returned. And then he said that he had a strange feeling, as if this was a completely different person, not the same as before. Xiang thoughtfully remarked that this guy had clearly had the chance to experience an incredible adventure back then. After these words, he snapped his fingers, demanding complete silence and concentration from everyone around him. The gentleman said that he wanted to catch Xiao Chen alive, because when it was his turn, he would tear off the flesh himself, piece by piece. Xiao Chen appeared and said that Xian's servants were too weak, so it was better for him to commit suicide so as not to disgrace himself any further. At this moment, Xiao Chen's opponents burst into wild laughter, clearly amused by this bold statement. Hao said that Xiao Chen must be out of his mind to dare to threaten the son of the governor of Zhangzhou, and the very next second, armed guards opened fire on the impudent intruder who had invaded their estate. But Xiao Chen maintained an incredible composure despite the bullets flying straight towards him. One powerful blow and all the bullets stopped, and the guy caught them with his hands without flinching. The hero said dismissively that if this was the Tang family's sneak attack, it would be useless against him. The next second, he began to jump rapidly across the rooftops, causing complete bewilderment among the crowd below. The guy thought that dealing with each enemy separately would be too long and ineffective. The hero noted that even the poisoning brought him unexpected benefits, eliminating a bottleneck in cultivation. With the new breakthrough and 3 internal cores, it can mask the aura using the latest technology, which will help save time. At that very moment, the opponents felt that an attack was approaching, directed specifically at them. Everyone felt the impact of the sword, which instantly deprived them of the ability to move or resist. One after another, the enemies noticed the approach of the shining sword, but they could no longer do anything to resist it. Soon, Xiao Chen gave the command to the technique to stop, because everything it was supposed to do had already happened. The young hero looked around the defeated crowd. Not a single enemy remained. Everyone was defeated. The guy narrowed his eyes with contempt and realized that now it was time for the main enemy. The girls who were at court ran away in fear, hoping to escape the magical horror. The 3 comrades watched in fear as this happened, their faces twisted in shock. Xiang stood there unmoving, silent, and staring at Xiao Chen. At that moment, one of the girls exclaimed that in front of them was not a man, but a real devil, and they had to run away immediately. But the next moment, the lady stopped short because someone suddenly grabbed her by the hair and pulled her back. Xiang threw her aside with disdain, and she hit the stone ground with force. However, the villain did not stop. He pushed her with his foot, making it clear that he considered the lady a worthless thing. After that, he coldly stated that Xiao Chen had only just now reached a level worthy of talking to him. Meanwhile, Xiao Chen confidently approached the 3 enemies, noticing that they had already lived their fill. He was the first to approach the frightened Wu Wenyalian and said that he would start the analysis with him. Without a moment's hesitation, Xiao Chen stepped on his head and pressed his enemy's face straight into the ground. He then delivered a powerful blow, completely knocking Wu Wenyalian unconscious. Now it was Jian and Hao's turn, who begged for the master's protection in a panic. But Xiang pushed the slaves away with cold disgust, not wanting to interfere with their fate. Hao, pushed away by his patron, fell powerlessly right at the feet of his mortal enemy. The next moment he received a powerful blow, from which he flew forward, barely breathing. Moments later, his body froze, and Jian screamed in horror, unable to believe what was happening. Xiao Chen wordlessly extended his hand towards him, and he clenched his teeth in despair, preparing for the worst. The boy begged for mercy, saying that he knew where Xiao Chen's ex-lover was hiding. However, the hero did not even flinch. Words were empty for him, and he carried out his plan. Moments later, another body slowly fell to the ground, plunging into silence. Xiang was deeply shocked. Now it was clear why even the saint of the Tang family couldn't defeat Xiao Chen. At this moment, a thug stood in front of the young man, declaring that the power of the 9 families was something beyond imagination. Therefore, if Xiao Chen didn't immediately kneel down and apologize, he would regret it. Xiang confirmed the servant's words. Only if Xiao Chen humiliated himself in front of him would he be pardoned. Meanwhile, in the ice room, the girls began to gradually come to their senses after their confinement. Ji admitted that she has been feeling a lot of internal tension lately, as if she was on pins and needles. Murong Xiaoyu also felt uneasy and said that she missed her elder brother very much. Long Zhaowen thoughtfully asked if the others thought that they might have had some kind of contact with Xiao Chen. However, everyone only remembered that they were next to him for a long time, and no more memories. Jayak noted that perhaps it was not worth continuing this conversation, since she felt that something important was approaching. At that moment, a golden silkworm flew into the room, seemingly harmless, even cute. However, Ji knew very well that behind the cute appearance lurked a deadly poisonous insect. Meanwhile, Xiao Chen calmly told the enemy that he was willing to spare him if he would just rip out his tongue right then and there. However, in response to this, Xiang only smirked and said that Xiao Chen would make an excellent dog that could be ordered around. But the next second, his tone changed. The guy gave orders to his men to capture Xiao Chen alive so that he could enjoy the humiliation of the enemy later. One of the thugs immediately rushed forward, believing that the younger brother clearly did not realize how much he had underestimated their master. But the young hero looked boldly at the enemy, and at the same time kept his cool. However, when the opponent tried to strike, his fist was instantly blocked. Xiao Chen did not even move. The bandit admitted with annoyance that the guy was strong, but added that he had another trump card that would change the course of the battle. Xiao Chen's eyes widened in surprise. He recognized the weapon, and his heart sank with a premonition. It was that same blade